Chainsaw Man Part 2. It is better to have loved and lost than to not love at all. I was Chainsaw Man's strongest soldier for as long as I can remember. I've read Part 2 weekly since it came out. Throughout my time in high school, I read it every single week, talked about it every single week, and made my analysis every single week. The amount of investment and time I put into Part 2 cannot be understated. Almost everything I've ever praised a story for, Part 2 seemed to have it. Part 2 was so mesmerizing and special. I was put under a genjutsu by Fujimoto. I was so utterly infatuated and obsessed with Part 2 and its direction. I thought about it almost every day. I have reread Part 2 from the beginning about 7 times. I tried to overly familiarize myself with this manga and understand what this chaotic author is trying to say. Part 2 at its peak is a complex, layered story exploring the identities of two teens struggling through their adolescence and agency. Part 2 at its worst is a grotesque display of over-sexualization masking as pseudo-intellectualism that forces its characters into comedic goofs to only bait the reader with something larger than what is actually there. Those two things are quite different, as you would imagine. In this video, I want to break down which one Fujimoto intended and which one he actually wrote. I am beyond aware of the divisiveness in Part 2. I have not only defended it at its worst, I have criticized the multiple directions of it. I've been making Part 2 videos since 2024, and trust me when I say this is the best video for an honest look at Part 2. This also isn't my normal critical diatribe. I think I dislike Part 2, but my feelings and overall impression of this story are not set in stone. As I keep hoping that I am misunderstanding different things, I make this video to resolve my different feelings and give a holistic look at Shonen Jump's most divisive story ever. Maybe this video could settle any debates or personal conflicts for other people. We will be getting into the story chronologically while taking all story context into consideration for the most part. I would say the most important thing regarding Part 2 is to consider how you personally feel. Consider why you think the way you do and why you feel the way you do. Despite the tone earlier, I do not want this video to be overly serious, and it should just be used as a retrospective analysis tackling how and where Fujimoto did his big one. Part 2 opens up with Bucky, class chicken that they're supposed to befriend and later eat. The teacher says this is to understand how precious life is, but I think this is supposed to draw familiarity between devils and humans. Later in this volume, we do get the statement of humanity being at war against the devils, which is a conflict that does persist throughout Part 2. We then get introduced to Asa Mitaka. I and everyone else pretty much loved Asa from the get-go. If you have ever been angry or petty in high school, her inner thoughts are pretty much a one-to-one with how you would have thought. Asa says different things to her class president that just show how jealous and angry she is. She cites the city as being corrupt. Later, when it's time to eat Bucky, the class says they won't do it, and the teacher says that's exactly what he was hoping for. They all go outside and play, and Bucky goes up to Asa and calls out her name to play with them all. Asa is happy to hear that Bucky remembered her name, and she realized that she was just jealous of all the people she criticized earlier. Asa trips and falls over Bucky, killing him. She obviously gets super sad and frustrated, all those types of emotions you would expect from something tragic happening. Asa goes out at night with her teacher and class president to visit Bucky's grave. While walking, Asa waits for the traffic light to ready up. Class president gets frustrated and reveals that she made a contract with the Justice Devil after sleeping with her teacher. As Asa is dying, she realizes that everyone must be jealous of someone else. That realization relieved her as she wishes she could live her next life more selfishly and do things over. The War Devil, in the form of a bird, takes over Asa's body and kills the class president. Yoru sees Chainsaw Man and remarks that she would make him spit up nuclear warheads. This is a solid first chapter, but there are multiple things that will be covered again concerning this first chapter. This video is not supposed to be a recap, but you need to understand the several different things mentioned and said in Part 2 to reach a certain conclusion. Asa wakes up to find the War Devil has claimed her body. As they are walking to school, the War Devil tells Asa she has to go into school not only because Chainsaw Man is there, but because she herself does not know the customs of humans. It gets to a point where Asa is so anxious to go to school, she says she would rather die than go inside. Asa then gets acquainted with Yoshida. Yoshida was one of the characters Fujimoto announced was going to be in Part 2 and was excited to draw. Seeing him before Denji in only the first 2 chapters is very interesting. Yoru wants Asa to ask for more information about Chainsaw Man, so she just takes over the body herself. Yoru then asks Yoshida how big is that dick boy, just for him to say small, and they leave each other alone until the end of the chapter. Before this point, Asa realizes that the War Devil has taken over her brain. She realizes she likely cannot turn into a normal person to begin with, and the War Devil is just gonna fully take over. Yoru tells Asa once they beat Chainsaw Man, she can get her body back. Yuko, Yoshida, and Asa are devil hunting in school when Asa passes by some girls from her class. Fujimoto depicts this anxiety and dread super well. It makes you realize Asa is as normal as any of us. Asa tells the trio she has something to do and leaves school for the day. Yuko follows Asa and they find meat around her shoes. Asa repeatedly says that she is fine until Yuko says that she is not fine and asks Asa to wear one of her shoes. When Asa says no, Yuko puts on the other shoe and runs to her house, with Asa chasing her. Yuko asks her if she wants to come inside, but Asa says no. Asa tries to return the shoe, but Yuko just gives her the other one, saying if she doesn't need them, then sell them, and if they won't sell, she could just throw them away. While walking home from Yuko's house, she stops and looks at her new shoes while Yoru asks if they're gonna sell them. I love this chapter. I mentioned in another video that early part 2 has all the vibes in the world. This chapter just communicates that. The completely altruistic act of sharing your pain with another person is something Fujimoto nails this time around. When he does it later, it only feels forced and corny. Everything about this chapter just focuses on Asa and her own feelings and temporal nature. The next day, Yuko asks Asa to go in town for some devil hunting. I always thought this was super weird that people genuinely go devil hunting, but whatever. Especially since Aki made such a big deal about devil hunting in the original series. Yoru tells Asa to kill Yuko. It is a pretty funny page turner in all honesty. We then learn the War Devil's name is Yoru. After encountering a devil, Yoru tells Asa she has bad news and even more bad news. The first being that they cannot beat the Bat Devil with how weak they are. The second being that Yoru can't take over her body when Asa is stricken with fear. I'm gonna ask that we pay more attention to this mechanic as a whole. Who controls whose body is the most arbitrary thing ever for part 2, as Fujimoto does not know how to write mechanics for his power system. Now it's time for one of my favorite chapters in part 2. Fujimoto moved to Shonen Jump Plus or whatever, which made him be able to release more pages and work on a more flexible schedule. And after seeing this chapter, I thought it was a genius decision. Asa and Yuko run away from the Bat Devil, but both get knocked on the ground. Yuko with the leg injury is knocked unconscious. Yoru tells Asa to kill Yuko and turn into a weapon. She appeals to reason, saying that Yuko is as good as dead anyway, as she is right now. She then says that she knows that Asa is not sorry for killing Bucky. She's sorry for being seen killing Bucky. Yoru reminds Asa that she made up her mind to live more selfishly if she got a do-over. Images of the Bat Devil, her class president, Yuko, her classmates, and Bucky rush into her head while reaching for an act. We then see Yuko from a downward angle in Asa's legs. Asa decides to pick up Yuko and carry her away from the Bat Devil. Asa then trips and falls and remembers how she always trips and falls at the most critical moments of her life. While running away from the Typhoon Devil, Asa saw a cat with a broken leg and picked it up to save it. While running with it, she tripped, needing her mother to save her. As her mother picks her up, she gets hit by a car herself. She also remembers her conversation with Yuko. Asa acts coldly, saying that she would rather not be pitied. Yuko says she doesn't care and says even if her actions turn out to be a mistake, if her heart was in the right place, that's all that matters. This stuns Asa and motivates her to pick herself up and carry Yuko. She says she wants to live like that too. She says her heart was in the right place at all times and she will save Yuko to prove that. As she thinks this, the building gets slammed by a big ass devil that is actively fighting Chainsaw Man. This entire fight with Denji and the Cockroach Devil is probably the best and only fight we get in the series. It has the best action in these huge spreads that look absolutely great. At the end of the fight, the Cockroach Devil asks Denji to choose between one student with a promising future or a car full of senior citizens. Denji ignores both of these options, cuts through the devil, and opts to save a cat. Now, I have made a video featuring this moment because of how important it is. I played copyright music during it, so the audio will have to either be muffled or will be super cut up to convey the message directly. The Cockroach Devil asks him to make a choice between one student with a promising future, 5 senior citizens. Because Denji is free from the conventional moral choices and expectations placed on him, he chooses to save a cat, perfectly symbolic of that agency and the lack of obedience. Denji choosing to save the cat is showing how he is free from the conventions of morality and choices presented to him. This ends up being one of the most important chapters that directly foreshadows this quote-unquote climax. We will discuss more about this chapter later because again, this is one of the best chapters in the series and I feel like I was the only one to actually realize what this chapter really meant. From this point on, we will transition into a more analysis type of video where I cover the different things of part 2 with fan reception. I wanted to speak candidly on the beginning of part 2 because frankly, it is my favorite. It has the least amount of technical issues and I always find myself reminiscing on such a great time. There will likely be no other piece of media that has captivated me the same way the beginning of part 2 has. It sucks, but this is genuinely as good as it gets. For even after this chapter, we run into problems. Denji's outside in front of the newscaster and we get this funny scene. Yoshida runs up on Denji and they go into a cafe. Yoshida says that he's been tasked to make sure Denji does not expose his identity as Chainsaw Man. The organization he mentions is likely public safety, so I do not know why he speaks so weirdly when he says that. I also cannot imagine why public safety wants to prevent Denji from making his identity known. That motivation is not made clear, but whatever. Yoshida asks Denji why is he trying to expose his identity and he says it's just for puh. His stupidity shocks Yoshida and they move on. Yoru gets frustrated that she was saved by Chainsaw Man. She explains that they fought a while ago and she lost and became weaker. It is revealed that her main motivation is not to be forgotten by the world. Asa then thinks to herself she's glad she didn't die and it's thanks to Chainsaw Man. This chapter by far is just the funniest Chainsaw Man chapter. Yoshida pays Denji to be a chair and Yoshida asks him if he wants a girlfriend. Denji asks him to introduce him to a girl. Yoshida asks Denji what's his type and Denji answers girls who are desperate for a boyfriend. Yoshida thinks of Asa and here's the trio. Yoshida introduces them and Denji asks Asa if she likes Chainsaw Man. Asa says she used to hate him but now she's neutral. Denji asks why she used to. Asa says he looks filthy and Denji says the dude bathes. Asa says he looks like an idiot with nothing going on in his head and Denji says he uses brain a ton. Asa says he only saves women and is horny and gross and Denji says he has a pure heart. Asa says Denji doesn't know that and it's not like he's him. Asa says how Chainsaw Man superfans would offend him over anything. This makes Denji reveal that he is Chainsaw Man. Asa calls him a loser and walks away. Asa then goes to visit Yuko and they share a genuinely funny moment. Yuko then tells Asa that she made a contract with the Justice Devil and that she will solve her bullying problem and to not come to school tomorrow. The next day, we see our guys at school and Yuko transforms into some worm monster. Yoru fights her until the Devil Hunter Club intervenes. The Death Devil, Lil D, is a part of this group by the way. She gets sent flying outside the second story at the school and comes back and is pretty fine. This is more of Fujimoto not writing. People in this series get injured from literally nothing but are able to tank random Super Kai blasts whenever they want. Fujimoto then uses his first cliffhanger of part 2. A cliffhanger is an ending to a coda that leaves the audience in suspense. It is used to entice the reader to come back and continue the story. As a weekly manga, you would want the reader to come back next week. The difference between Yuko telling Asa to not come to school and this moment is simple. The former was not in the height of drama, it was simply setting up a future development. The latter, however, is happening as part of the conflict resolution to see the next plan to deal with Yuko. The latter happens way too often in Chainsaw Man. It is incredibly disappointing to see Fujimoto use cheap bait and cheap drama to keep the reader engaged. Fujimoto seems to be partially aware. Look at this. What are you thinking? You absolutely can't do that. W dialogue, man. Asa turns her uniform into a weapon and accidentally kills Yuko. Lil D comes around the corner asking if she wants to save Yuko. Asa obviously says yes and Lil D says anything for my little sister. Okay, I want everyone to pay attention for a second here. Yuko was on death's door and Lil D just gave her a chug splash. How? How the fuck is she able to do that? I don't want to call out these incredulous plot holes or whatever, but I want people to know that Fujimoto hardly ever thinks about the mechanics behind the series. Yuko gets revived, destroys some buildings, then battles Chainsaw Man. Denji defeats her in a pretty funny panel and Yoru wakes up and sees him. The conflict ends and pretty much everyone goes home. Asa thinks on the dream she keeps having. She's running down a hallway with the ground littered with dead chickens. At first, she tries not to step on them, but it gets filled up with so many chickens she can't avoid it. She says there's a darkness ahead of her, but she always wakes up at this part. I have an idea on how this dream relates to the climax, but I don't want to admit the answer because it feels like the lamest shit ever. Asa wakes up in the middle of the night and hears a knock at her door. Yuko is outside and wants to say bye. Fujimoto in this panel is trying to say that part 2 is not the same as part 1. Asa opens the door and they have a pretty good moment overall with Yuko. It works for me. It is pretty emotionally cathartic and makes me feel like this relationship and arc was worth it. Yuko leaves us with 3 things. The Justice Devil is at their school. 2, "If only I could read birds' minds too." This phrase is a thematic metaphor, with Yuko asking if only she knew how to enact justice without losing herself. Birds as a motif in part 2 lost a lot of their meaning as the story continued, but here early on, they reflect the person's agency and freedom. And 3, Yuko is killed by a fake chainsaw man. Okay, everyone keep this in mind for later because we'll have a much bigger discussion about this plot point in mystery. This is the end of the Justice Devil arc. Voila, this is the best arc part 2 has to offer. I feel like this arc sets up a lot of Johns in a pretty interesting way, without padding or wasting time. Every character in this arc is incredibly efficient and works so well in isolation. I enjoy this arc a lot, and I call it the best just because it has the least amount of problems and frustrates me the least. Yes, there are many problems this arc sets up, but just because the tree ends up being rotten, it's not like the seed is. In this next arc, Yoru and Asa are looking at the damage Yuko caused. Asa asks if Yoru knows Lodi, who said she was their little sister. Yoru says no. I do not know how Yoru doesn't know about her big sister or any of the horsemen. This isn't the biggest problem because there is no evidence that contradicts this. I'm just saying it feels off and a bit wrong. Asa runs into the devil hunting club and we see Lodi there. We also get to mention that only 2 people left the club, which adds to the fact that Lodi was indeed there. We get introduced to Haruka Isayumi. He claims to be Chainsaw Man, and this is a very weird misdirect plot point or whatever. After showing us another Chainsaw Man exists, he shows us his Haruka guy mixed up with another devil who happens to have the Chainsaw Man starter on his chest. Fujimoto puts the clues here for Haruka to end up being the fake Chainsaw Man. The problem is, Haruka isn't the fake Chainsaw Man, and that was apparently a red herring. The extra problem is, that's not how a red herring works. A red herring is supposed to distract you from the actual answer or solution. Haruka isn't a distraction, he is a dead end. This works especially poorly because Haruka is not a character. He exists for vapid reasons in the manga with no narrative relevance or character arc in the slightest. Him having the starter was a pump fake. Him working with the devil is an airball. There is genuinely nothing special about this character, which makes me question why he was introduced to begin with, especially concerning the fact that the real answer with the fake Chainsaw Man is slightly contrived and even more slightly convoluted. Moving on, Asa is resolved to turn someone into a weapon, someone between a cat and a criminal. She chooses Denji and they go on a date. We get one of the worst panels in human history, and then we see Asa and Denji on their date. Some of the funniest Johns in the story are here when Asa starts citing from Wikipedia about different fish stuff they see. It feels like the opposite of the Rent-a-Girlfriend opening when Kazuya gave Chizuru a bad review because she lacked fish trivia. Did Fujimoto predict this? Denji storms off to look at the penguins and Yoru says it was because she is boring. Asa claps back mad as shit, saying that she did everything right and that Yoru can't understand because she's a devil. Lodi pulls up right next to her and starts agreeing with Asa. She says Denji doesn't know the first thing about right and wrong. Lodi introduces herself as the Famine Devil and we get to call her Fami. Pay attention here. Lodi snaps her fingers, makes Yoru disappear, then says Asa will not leave the aquarium until she can turn Denji into a devil. What? Do you see what I mean here? Lodi has the ability to transport Yoru's soul away from Asa and speak telepathically to Asa after teleporting. The mechanics in this series are so arbitrary and random, they have no rhyme or reason. Again, this isn't the biggest problem, but please remember how these characters just do whatever they want to because the author doesn't care. Denji and Asa meet up with the Devil Hunting Club plus Yoshida, and they have to hunker down. After a brief falling out with Denji, Asa tries to help the group out with her cell phone, but that goes wrong. She sits in the aquarium hallway and talks with Haruka. Haruka explains that he is in fact not Chainsaw Man, and Yoshida jokes with Denji about this. Yoshida says it's probably been about 3 days and he's made peace with death. He then asks Denji if he thinks Chainsaw Man would eat the Death Devil for him. Denji then talks to Asa and asks if she's doing alright. Asa starts ranting, saying how she was going to turn him into a weapon, but can't do it because she doesn't know what is right or wrong anymore. Denji sits with her and tries to get her to eat starfish. Now, as they cook starfish and start eating, Asa and Denji have a genuinely really fun interaction. Asa devises a plan and they execute it together after sharing some really good moments. Things like this really help me buy into their dynamic. After sharing some really good moments, Asa attempts to use her power to buy the aquarium and turn it into a weapon. Although her abilities are granted off perception, the use of trying to buy something then turn it into a weapon is incredibly interesting. I think this is the first and last time time we get any type of creative or clever usage out of these powers. Frankly, these powers only get worse as the series goes on. Asa buys the aquarium and Denji notices a penguin. Yoru takes over Asa's body to kill the Eternity Devil in 2 really cool panels. Haruka looks at Asa and goes, "That power, could it be?" Yeah, the lamest shit ever. Lil D looks down on the group and says so much for that idea. Fujimoto draws his big ass page with Yoshida and Lil D looking at each other. Yeah, sure. Moving on, Denji walks Asa home and we get very cool scenes between them just building up their relationship. With that being said, Yoru takes over Asa's body and Asa says Denji's spinal cord sword. When this chapter dropped, this was classic Fujimoto. We were all shocked and could not wait until next week. Unfortunately though, this was another pump fake airball from our second cliffhanger of the story. Before we proceed any further, let's talk about 2 things. 1. Why was Lil D trying to force Denji's death? When looking at the full context of part 2, you know her plan is to make Chainsaw Man and the War Devil super strong. That is in line here, but also contradicts it at the same damn time. Simply put, Yoru could turn Denji into a weapon. That is what the entire quote-unquote climax is based on. Why was Lil D trying to kill Denji, especially when her plan is to make Denji super strong, and that is why she starts the Chainsaw Man Church to begin with? It feels super contrived and damn near in retcon territory. Her plan, we come to find out, doesn't make any sense with this plot point, and there's no extra writing to bridge the gap in this plot hole. 2. Because Yoru is more capable of turning Denji into a weapon and Lil D is aware of this, why the fuck did it not happen here? I have seen people argue it is because Asa likes Denji and views him as a romantic interest, yada yada, but no, that doesn't make any sense at all. Those feelings going into Yoru's brain doesn't remove the idea of one-sided ownership. The whole idea of Yoru having weapons is based on an emotional connection. Yoru wanted to turn Yuko into a weapon because of their friendship. Friendship doesn't imply power dynamic, which would mean they're essentially equals, yet we have no reason to believe it wouldn't work. The entire basis of the powers automatically necessitate deep emotional feelings, however, it just arbitrarily did not work here for whatever fucking reason. This may sound like nitpicking, but if the entire quote-unquote climax is predicated on Denji not being turned into a weapon, we have to make sure the mechanics in previous plot are not undermined, or at the very least make sense. Denji and Asa go home, and Asa comes to the conclusion that Denji doesn't like her. I don't know why she came to this conclusion. That is just not how the powers work. The powers work the more you like someone, not how much they like you. If you love cats, it doesn't matter if they like you back, you can still turn them to a good weapon. W. Fujimoto mechanics, doesn't remember what the fuck he wrote. Classic. The next day, Denji and Asa plan their date. Asa is going to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once at Denji's place. As a warning, Denji says she might die if she breaks the rules. We then have Haruka sitting in his chair watching the both of them. Asa goes to Denji's crib, and Everything Everywhere All at Once is so boring and asinine and a waste of time, Yoru takes over and kisses Denji. Nayuta comes home and hits her with chain jail. Nayuta turns Asa into a dog and erases her memories to steer her away from Denji. Nayuta picks up on Yoru's scent and says she doesn't want Denji to be hurt. I have to mention, I love Nayuta and Denji's dynamic. It is honestly tear-jerking just how deep and how ass Fujimoto made it. We'll get into the latter later, but right now I love how Denji treats her as like a power type little sister, roommate, and daughter almost. It is just super emotionally resonant. Asa goes on the longest coping speech ever after being made to believe that Denji stood her up. It is super funny how people think Asa is autistic for moments like these. Like, no bro, stop projecting your own neurodivergence on characters. Yoshida comes up to Asa and asks her to keep him company for a little bit. All of this amounts to Yoshida telling Asa to stay away from Denji. Yoshida says she can interpret this how she likes and just takes off. Oh my god. Yoshida has no reason to say this and there is not a clear motivation here. Yoshida is saying this, Fujimoto is making Yoshida say this to build up drama and a subtle mystery, but he doesn't actually make any sense at all. This is like in One Piece when Pudding over here is crying, but again, there is no reason for her to cry because she is happy to be following the Tea Party plan. There is no reason for her to be there as she has no ill will against the Straw Hats, and there's no reason for her to whisper because Opera is in on the plan too. These two moments are just the writers writing weird drama that does not go anywhere or mean anything because it is not congruent with the rest of the story and you have to fill in blanks in order to make it work. I'm sorry to get caught up dunking on Yoshida, but as we progress in the video, you will see why I go to this effort. This is the end of the dating Denji arc. Detail stuff in my coverage, but this arc's greatest strength is the character building. Nayuta and Denji and Asa and Denji are quickly established dynamics. They have a beguiling essence to them that is what made me and many other readers anticipate chapters weekly. I just love a lot of these moments. This arc also did a good job of setting up different mysteries and motivations. The payoff to these things are questionable, but the setup works here. It boxes our characters in to develop their relationships and also progress the would-be storyline. For me, this arc works and I enjoyed a lot on reread. So the Falling Devil arc was the first arc that had its major hiccups in part 2. My friends and I who were reading weekly up to this point started feeling the fatigue. The two of them dropped it while I continued reading to reach an unsatisfying conclusion. Again, please try to consider the character motivations and future roles in the story from this arc and their dialogue. We open up with Lil D in a restaurant with Yoshida. Yoshida is under the impression he is talking to the Fami devil and calls her Fami. He says he didn't think she would show and even calls her senpai. We then get the prophecy of Nostradamus. It's known as a great terror that will descend down and end humanity. What's interesting is that apparently 23 out of 30 people will die during this time. Yoshida says Fami, quote unquote, is up to something and has to spill her guts or else shit might get wicked. Yoru takes over Asa's body and prepares to fight, but quickly hits the Joestar technique as they know they cannot win. The Falling Devil appears and has an ability that sinks the heart and makes you float. I like the metaphor there, and it took me a while to really appreciate what the Falling Devil was supposed to do. The Falling Devil is a direct subversion of Part 1 and its themes and mechanics. Part 1 used food to connect with others and build relationships, while the chef Falling Devil is using those same connections to submerge you in a deeper darkness. It is clever writing as an idea for Part 2. Asa starts floating after remembering how she had her family taken away from her. An interesting parallel to this is that Denji started off practically lonely and developed the relationships that made him a lot more interested in cats. Asa only had a relationship with her cat, and once she lost that, she became permanently lonely. It is a bit rough around the edges, but just goes again to stress how these two characters are mirrors of one another. Asa tries to fight off the Falling Devil's abilities, but comes to realize her own problems. She is afraid of companionship and loneliness, that push and pull she cannot fight back against. Elsewhere, Denji runs into the Falling Devil and gets put on his ass. Denji, unable to fight, gets blood from a strange person. Keep this in mind for a couple of minutes. Actually, the Falling Devil says they need to drop Asami Taka into hell. Keep this in mind too. Now, I was at school reading this chapter 127. I felt like this chapter had the right ideas but sloppy, messy, unfitting execution. The Falling Devil catches Asa and tells her that their connection to life is weak and is much easier to let go. Asa, thinking of Yugo and her cat, lets go and surrenders. She notices it's peaceful and how she won't have to be upset anymore and doesn't have to lie in bed thinking about all her wrongs. She says how she has one regret and is cut off by Denji. Denji and Asa are talking about the bad things in life, and we get some pretty bad prose here in my opinion. Asa saying nobody has it worse than me, Denji saying life has crappy moments mixed in with awesome ones. This chapter has an allegory for suicide. It is imagining the weight of your sins being let go by essentially giving up on life. Despite that, we have bad dialogue and an even worse tone shift. It is too explicit and on the nose, which fares a corny message, and the tone shift detracts from the message entirely. Like I said, it is a chapter with a good grand idea, but doesn't work with the way Fujimoto actually wrote it. This is obviously made a bit worse when the convo follows with Asa basically calling Denji an incel. As this happens, they fall into hell and Asa gets knocked out. Denji tries to run away but is blocked by Falling and her goons. Again, she says she only wants Asa, but suddenly the Falling Devil is cut by chainsaws. This mysterious person says to evade all the devil attacks until sunrise. Asa and Denji escape hell with the devil chasing them. They get on the motorcycle and try to run away until sunrise. I was deadass dumbfounded when this chapter came out, because Fujimoto put 6 double spreads of his protagonist on a motorcycle here. All of this concludes when Denji and Asa fly right into a devil's mouth. We get this funny page, and then the truth behind the matter is revealed. Lil D was manipulating the Falling Devil the entire time. Nayuta is also there and is the reason why the devil spit up Asa and Denji. Lil D says she only intended to starve Asa in the devil's belly to make her a pawn. Okay, this reveal right here is very bad for a myriad of reasons. Off script, we later learn that Lil D's abilities only work when she eats the person. So I don't know how starving her would turn her into a pawn, because starving someone and eating them are two separate things. So either this was a retcon or she lied and didn't reveal the full truth. I think it's just a retcon, but it's cool. Back on script, if the intent was to make the War Devil your pawn, can you not already do that? Better question, could you not already do that? In the dating Denji arc, Lil D said she would starve Asa, and guess what? Asa was literally starving, so why couldn't you turn them into a pawn then? If this was a new motivation, which could be the case but not necessarily implied, then again, why not turn them into a pawn now? The Falling Devil is so much stronger. Just at the sight of seeing her, Yoro started doing the Running Man. If you are able to control a demon like this, how can you not control some peon like Yoru? Again, bad mechanics from Fujimoto. This entire arc, the Falling Devil was talking about sending Asa to hell. I guess this was just a big pump fake to put her on a plate and feed her to season 6 James Gandolfini. It sets the wrong expectations personally and feels like, again, cheap bait, because guess what? Our guys were never in any real danger. This is all fake tension because the stakes never mattered, as Lil D was not going to kill anyone and is arbitrarily not moving forward with turning War into a pawn when she is unconscious right next to her. Nayuta's inclusion also feels stupid, but that's par for the course. What just happened before our eyes is Nayuta controlling the Glutton Devil to make humans taste like poop. Because humans now taste like poop, the Fallen Devil got mad and erased that square. Lil D shows up and says, okay, return whatever, and we move on into the next arc. Nayuta literally just shut down Lil D's plan, and she has no reaction, no response. This is why this arc is so low for me. It feels like everything that has happened just happened because Fujimoto wanted to draw some comedy scenes, some action shots, and barely develop the characters in mystery. It is clear that Fujimoto wants to write a plot here, as he wouldn't bring up the Nostradamus stuff if he didn't. But the writing and treatment of the story beats makes me think he just wants to fuck around. Let me spin back around to the person who gave Denji blood. I believe this person was the fake Chainsaw Man we later see. It is obviously ambiguous as hell, and I can't prove anything to be the case. So this fake Chainsaw guy supposedly gives Denji blood and then helps him escape hell. That is very cool. When you think of why didn't he help them and why didn't he fight falling off, you come to the simple conclusion that he wants Denji to prove something to him. You know what I said earlier, right? This arc just has the right ideas, but some of the most piss poor, weirdly written execution possible. If I was gonna make this arc worse somehow, I would turn the main mystery nonsensical, turn the driver of the plot into a weird, convoluted plot device that only has agency whenever the writer remembers, and kill off or disregard a lot of the characters. Oh shit, wait. And with that, we make it to the Chainsaw Man church arc. On my first read of this arc, I thought this arc was like perfectly balanced bits of what Chainsaw Man tries to be. On closer inspection, I think I was slightly wrong, but not too far off. Let's get into it. The most important development here is obviously with the Chainsaw Man church. It has been established as people come to rely on Chainsaw Man to fight off devils. This makes sense as he was already a hero in tons of people's eyes. This is the logical conclusion. However, because so many people disagree with this deification of Chainsaw Man, people protest and argue public safety should treat Chainsaw Man as a devil and put him down. Because of this crossroads of Denji's heroism, public safety has forced him to never turn into Chainsaw Man again. The time has come for Denji to choose between Nayuta's life and his greedy desires. After this interaction, Denji has chosen not to turn into Chainsaw Man and live a normal life with Nayuta. Late at night while watching TV, Denji sees a news report on the Chainsaw Man church. The church apparently has Chainsaw Man and brings him up to speak. This guy cites that an encounter with the Justice Devil has turned him into Chainsaw Man and he fights for a world without devils. Denji screams saying that he is wrong and that he himself has never thought about why he fights and how that guy is a fake Chainsaw Man. I can't lie, I feel for Denji's situation here. It is easy to sympathize with Denji just because of how intimate being Chainsaw Man is for him. I also did some rereading of this arc and I realized it's decently long, so we'll be going pretty fast paced and getting into major plot beats and story beats. This arc is also pretty funny, but we're not going to necessarily cover all of that. Moving on, Yoru and Asa are chilling before going to school. They talk about how Yoru is slowly getting stronger, then we see Lil D teleport into their house. We get the funniest panel in Chainsaw Man, and then we get an explanation of the current events. It is really nothing special. Lil D just tells Asa that she could save the red Chainsaw Man and Yoro could kill the black Chainsaw Man. Lil D gets Asa and Yoro to join the church and become a figurehead for power. Denji goes to school normally but decides to cut class with Yoshida because he is bored as hell not being able to turn into Chainsaw Man. We then meet Fumiko, who is likely one of the worst characters I have ever seen in fiction. She is introduced by assaulting Denji in two of the stupidest panels ever, then she is singing some stupid ass song while a bunch of guys jump Denji. We find out Fumiko is Denji's bodyguard sent from public safety to protect him. Denji is chilling when sword queer Miri appears and starts chatting to him about the Chainsaw Man church. Denji perception blitzes everyone at the scene in base to tell Miri that he's gonna check out the church with him. At the church, we get mention of how a cult used to run the building but they've taken over it now. We then get Fujimoto writing America being the worst. He really does not like America. We then get introduced to Barum. Barum is one of the most interesting non-characters ever, and we'll talk about him as he does more things. For now, he introduces pretty much the main conflict for Denji and thematic conflict overall. Barum has some sinister aura and he just taunts and goads Denji. Moving on, we see Denji cope with not being Chainsaw Man. We also get Barum's motivations to draw out Chainsaw Man. He says killing regular devil hunters will likely draw out Chainsaw Man and he's planning on killing a lot of folks. We then see Denji sitting at a fair watching Nayuta have fun. Fumiko is with him and we get some fake characterization. We hear the norm for Chainsaw Man with her parents dying and it's essentially every character's backstory. But Fumiko seems earnest, saying that her goal is to actually save Chainsaw Man, specifically to save Denji. Barum comes up and sits down with Denji. He basically says how he wants to save Chainsaw Man too and be the biggest fan possible. He also says how devils will appear from all over the place and people will scream "Save us Chainsaw Man." As these three geeks prepare to cut off the limbs of people, Quan Chi appears out of nowhere and puts a stop to it, absolutely decapitating these dudes. The next couple of chapters are pretty much just generic Johns we can cover pretty quickly. Public safety likely knew about the Chainsaw Man Church's plan of terrorism. They made Quan Chi stop the mall a bit and now they're going to take over all the buildings under threat of treason. We get a couple funny panels and everything, but the main meat comes from an autopsy report. These devil inspectors say that the Justice Devil was killed by the Falling Devil just last arc. They say there is no room for interpretation here. This means the contract with the Chainsaw Man Church could not have been from the Justice Devil as we were led to believe. This is an interesting enough twist, but it also makes me think of the pacing in this arc. We are supposed to believe that the Chainsaw Man Church has so much clout and motion, but we are also supposed to naturally expect it to be a front and a con job somehow. We get introduced to these political Johns in chapter 132 and 133. Despite all that though, all of the political Johns are cancelled and stopped at chapter 145. So for 13 or so chapters, we have this huge organization being relevant when it matters just for it to be shut down. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to why this happens and the different motivations. To me, this is pretty silly and I do not like this general direction, but I'm willing to see it through from the author's intentions. For example, Yoshida comes and cuts off Asa's arm because they were going to do some devil stuff. While this happens, Barum is resisting arrest singing the same song as Yoshida. Barum then explains how Fami contacted a devil to transform the power within human hearts. This devil was the Fire Devil. Now, when this chapter came out, I think I was losing my mind for a variety of reasons, but this is one of the most intriguing yet mishandled plot points I think I've ever seen ever. We'll get into it when we have more info. Barum explains that the more people the Fire Devil has a contract with, the stronger he gets. As the explanations ramp up, we learn all of this is to make Denji and Asa super strong to stop the Death Devil from descending. This is the Great King of Terror that was mentioned so much. It only makes sense too because primal fears are often called dangerous and evil names, and the King of Terror, which would obviously be the King of Fear, obviously would be death because everyone is afraid of it. To me, this makes beyond sense, especially narratively, as the Horsemen are 9 out of 10 times the antagonist. So the conversation Fami had with Yoshida about the King of Terror only makes sense with this knowledge, to be honest. The prophecy of the King of Terror descending is related to the Death Devil, contextualized with the future devil being used to practically confirm this, and with Nayuta also saying she and Fami can tell because they are related to the Death Devil. I'm harping on this because this is the direction of the story. This is what Fujimoto wanted to write. This is how he wanted his story to be told. All of this is uber important, so let's all remember this for the quote-unquote climax. Barum says that over 300 250,000 people have been turned into these demons worldwide. Barm sends his army onto Denji and the gang, and Quan Chi goes to save them. We get a cool panel and a shot that makes me think Fumiko could have been a real character, but then we go back to Asa and Yoshida. Yoru is able to turn their room into a weapon without touching it. She then looks to fight Yoshida, but in this super weird panel, she runs into a wall, I suppose unaware of her own strength. I guess she blitzed herself? I don't know. Yoshida then takes off as Yoru remembers her strength. Back with Denji and his squad, Fumiko says Denji can't go home and cannot bust out the chainsaws. With all of this, Nayuta gets heated and looks to play with Fumiko. Denji tells her to run and Fumiko takes off. Nayuta says a lot of interesting stuff this chapter, like her nature to kill things as the devil, and Denji should join the devil's side with her and rule over things. I think this is thematic setup for what the entire part is about, but it's just weird in a vacuum. This is all random from Nayuta, and her advocating to kill all his friends from school is just super weird, but whatever. I'm sure we'll get a backstory or an arc to develop why she feels this way, and seemingly contradicts her previous dialogue of wanting to preserve and relish human life. We get this great panel though. Like I said, I live for panels like these. We then get this great sequence with Denji stepping on a bird and talking to Pochita. He opens up about his dreams and admits that he wants to be Chainsaw Man. Denji and Nayuta go home to see their apartment on fire and Barm there just making a complete mess of things. Public safety comes and tries to put down Barm, but his reinforcements arrive. So Fumiko and public safety are off guarded by the original clown trio that Quan Chi took out, magically coming back by the way. The excuse is that public safety just let them escape. Yeah, sure. Nayuta uses chain jail on Barm, and Barm says it doesn't work because maybe his body is still under Makima's rule, or maybe because his heart belonged to her and no one else. Now, what the fuck type of sense does that begin to make? The power of the control devil is to control anyone who the person believes they are lesser than themselves. If that's the case, then how the fuck is Barm not being controlled here? The only way this could make sense is if Nayuta is afraid of Barm in some way, but that isn't at all alluded to, so we just have Fujimoto making up mechanics once more. But despite all that nonsense, this entire scene works. Denji rips off his chest to pull his cord and turn into Chainsaw Man again. Denji fights Barm's bastards and he just wins, not gonna lie. This fight isn't all that impressive and it's just stuff on the page, to be honest. There are decent character bits here, like Denji feeling good that he can turn back into Chainsaw Man, but that is just one piece of this large ass cake. A big community of people see Denji and they think he's one of those devils that are going around killing everybody, so they all gang up on him. Nayuta tries to save him using her powers but is struggling because she can only use 3 chain jails at once. She asks Fumiko for help and this bitch says no, I'm out of here. The entire reason she is there, gone. The entire backstory she narrated like a bad commentary YouTuber, gone. The entire character we have come to expect for any 1% of a reason, gone. Thank you, Fujimoto. I am so glad Fumiko is a character. Nayuta is struggling against the mob when Barm pulls a gun out on her. I have to say, this is our 3rd cliffhanger, quality of which is very subjective. It is framed like Barm is going to use it on her, but then suicide baits. To me, that's deflating, but it's nonetheless a cliffhanger. The whole thing ends with the mob ganging up on her and we cut to this backstory. This backstory demonstrates Nayuta's conflict of trying to find herself and develop her own happiness. It is parallel to Denji dreaming. Thinking he couldn't ever have a family because he killed his own dad. This is all interesting character stuff that just gets more and more fascinating the more part 2 ramps up. Denji wakes up in a hospital bed next to Yoshida, and he tells Denji since he broke the rules there is no guarantee he can live a normal life. During this, Denji consistently asks where Nayuta is. Denji is then getting his body dismembered to become property of the state by public safety. As this happens, this guy orlobs into Chainsaw Man's most fun cliffhanger. It would take a war to compromise this facility's safety. This is one of the cooler cliffhangers just because of the break week of people guessing who this was. Again, it shows a beyond intentionality because Fujimoto wanted people to guess. He could have just easily shown us Lil D and Asa, but he purposefully hid it. Now this is where a lot of people say the church arc ends, but I think this next section serves as a bridge between these 2 arcs. Like I said, Asa and Lil D are going to break out Denji and they infiltrate the building. On first read, this dynamic is very fun, but on second read, it is clear that Lil D is trying to see how much stronger the War Devil has gotten since their plan. We can also assume that Lil D is breaking out Denji so we can get stronger and do something about war. This entire mini arc thing is just about that, to be honest. It's a fun stretch because of how many funny jokes we get in the reintroduction of Katana Man officially. There are cool developments in lines like killing Chainsaw Man is the reason why my heart still beats, and obviously also finding out Denji is Chainsaw Man. I think that's where we'll end it though. This arc of Chainsaw Man is weird. For me, it sets up some clever thematic writing and cashes in on previous stuff, but that's not too substantial. The Chainsaw Man church is still contrived, as all of it happens demonstrably too fast. The arc has way too many weird and frivolous moments, like Denji beating up the posse of people during the karaoke thing. When I look at this arc in a vacuum, I get disappointed. Quan Chi existed to do nothing but aura farm for a second and a half. Fumiko's point of existence in the story is meaningless because she left Nayuta to fight a mob by herself. There's no climactic point of this arc like there was previously within multiple fights. The closest thing we get is Yoshida and Asa fighting, but that goes nowhere times 5. I am just disappointed, I guess. I don't want to get into it now, but I definitely think this arc gets worse with full context. With the full context of the story as we know it, I'm willing to bet this is one of the worst arcs of Chainsaw Man, period. Like I said though, I do not want to get into it now, and I want to tackle these things as it comes. This arc isn't all bad though, because it is Chainsaw Man at its absolute funniest. We see the gang sleeping in this apartment with Lil D eating and everyone trying to watch TV. Denji is sleeping, but when he wakes up he gets his balls stepped on. Denji screams that he has to find Nayuta. Denji and the gang go to his apartment to find all of it burned down. Trying to face the facts, Yoru tells Denji that Nayuta has been killed. Asa intervenes and tries to help Denji process his grief. They reconcile that Denji must be hungry and they head out for sushi. During the train ride, Denji asks what's up with Asa and Lil D gives us some answers. The main thing we take away is our two character motivations to this point. Denji realizes that things can never go back to how they were with Nayuta. What is gone is gone. What has happened has happened. Asa, on the other hand, is trying to save Denji and give him back everything that he has lost. There is work here for a good dynamic and a push and pull where we can see our characters at their best. Their opposing outlook can be the start toward parallel character arcs, where Denji regains a fragment of his life and Asa has an infinitely happier perspective regarding life. It could all convalesce into a healthier, more fluid dynamic and arc of development. This is literally so exciting. I know Fujimoto will cash in on this.
But what the hell, boy?
Yo, somebody get the door. No.
Chapter 167 disappointed me. It shocks my spirit every day remembering how I used to honestly defend this. I defended it with honest intentions though. I assumed this was part of Yoru's 5D chess game to submerge Asa's soul and get closer to evil or something. That is just not the case. It is explained that Yoru just happened to do what she did because it was fun. She just got memories that were erased of her kissing Denji, and then she just did it again because it was fun and nothing more. I think understating the character motivations here only makes it worse because they don't exist. It is simply done because the characters felt like it and nothing more. Even any drama you can extrapolate from the scene becomes incredibly vapid all too quickly. Again, this is because the lack of a real reason and lack of real writing subsequently. I said it in a video over a year ago, and I truly believe this dynamic between Yoru and Denji is a weird parasite infestation that the writer isn't addressing. Yoru is taking over his friend's body and exploiting his sexual weakness, but to Fujimoto, that is hardly ever addressed or mediated or done in any fascinating way that isn't pedantic shock value. I think this was truly the downfall of part 2. I and many other readers just weren't aware of it yet. Asa's reaction to this is just trash. There is no other way to put it. There was talk about this being a mistranslation or something, but no dog. This is garbage even if the word choice is a bit different. There needs to be an entirely new sentence for this not to be trash. Asa not caring about her body being used to give Denji a happy ending, but being concerned with how Denji might think she's less modest is fucking retarded. Excuse my French, but there is no other way to say this. The development and dynamic between Denji and Asa was beyond great in the first 3 arcs, and Yoru coming in right here could have been a remarkable turning point, but it's not. It puts a huge stake in the relationship they have to work to beat. Even if we want to super steelman and assume that was the intention during the final fight, this and this page is not how you set that up. This is just one of the worst chapters and worst plot points and worst moments I have ever seen in any manga. The only thing I can think that is worse than this is Ymir Fritz being in love with the king. I don't think Fujimoto could write something worse than that on purpose though. Moving on, the crew go to a sushi place and where they meet Barum. He plays coy and baits Denji with different info like turning into Chainsaw Man and the savory taste of squid. In the most biggest shocking twist of the story, Nayuta's head gets rolled out on a sushi dish in front of Denji's face. Let's wait a second to get into that. Chainsaw Man turns black and Pochita has to fight different devil hunters. He absolutely cooks them and everyone that runs in front of him. It is very cool overall and climaxes with Yoru sacrificing her children, Tank and Gun, to regrow her arms and overpower Chainsaw Man. The aging devil comes and wants to save Chainsaw Man and stuff. This is another devil with arbitrary I do what I want abilities, and they send Asa and Denji into their ageless world. Let's go back to Nayuta. The cope of Nayuta isn't really dead never existed to me. When this chapter came out, I felt something. I felt Fujimoto unabashedly put all the shock value he possibly could into this one reveal. I think upturning this reveal would be uncharacteristic and undo all the shock value that I felt like he intended. For example, he intended the Aki door thing to be a very shocking and dramatic page turner. He intended the same thing here but times 50. Let's understand why Nayuta died. Yoshida told Denji that public safety would kill Nayuta if he ever turned into Chainsaw Man again. That always bothered me. Why the fuck does public safety dick suck Denji so bad they're gonna kill his only family member just for disobeying their instructions? I am aware it is because of vague political problems with the name of Chainsaw Man, but we already established that the whole church thing was rushed and forced, meaning the initial motivations for public safety killing Nayuta are contrived as shit. This is absolutely horrible. Fujimoto knew this was bad as it was intended to be a turning point for part 2, so he retconned it and changed the motivations to, we need to break Denji's contract to use the real Chainsaw Man's power. This is more understandable and a much better justification for her death. The problem is, it was initially predicated on a contrivance. Denji struggling and turning into Chainsaw Man is him literally having to choose between his desire for sex and adoration or his family life. I have said this since forever. Part 2 is about choices. The thing is, Denji chose wrong. Denji in his mind killed Nayuta. By doing so, he fundamentally fucked up his two things characterizing him best. It was him that killed his father, Aki and power. Denji killing Nayuta is only natural. How could he have a family after all? This is some brilliant writing that could be absolutely game changing. I don't think a lot of people, including myself, realized all the detailing at the time. It could be the perfect development to make Denji have an insane character arc and grow fundamentally as a person. It is one step away from ascending Chainsaw Man to a god tier above Hunter x Hunter, above JoJo's, above Vagabond. Denji has killed all of his family, and when presented with the choice between family or Chainsaw Man, he chose Chainsaw Man. How does he handle this? How does he grapple with his identity issue that is an immediate contradiction with how he perceives himself? How, Fujimoto? How? Tell me how! Fuck you, Fujimoto. Fujimoto who never thought of any of that. Denji never grows from this. The clear fact is, and which is trying to upset me, is that Denji moves on from this incredibly quickly. You can argue the scars are still there, but that isn't actual writing. That isn't development. I dislike everything about this aging arc. It is hype moments and aura masquerading as a layered think piece between choices and morality. Because the part is over, we have to assume this bit with the aging devil arc is Denji's donking epiphany. Because we have to assume that, the writing here is just dog shit. Look at the timeline here. Nayuta's corpse is shown to Denji. He gets teleported into the ageless world. He cries and mourns for a couple of pages, then he gets a plan to beat the aging devil, all the while shouting that the bad guys can't beat him because he can always get new family. The worst day of Denji's life, resulting from the worst decision he has ever made, was resolved in an hour or two, with him just saying, so what? Fujimoto, when I get my fucking hands on you, bro. The second reason why this Nayuta thing is so much worse than what we initially think it is because of the fridging of her character. I don't mean that term entirely literally, as I don't think it applies 100%, but I would nonetheless use it because of the mistreatment of Nayuta. Fridging is where a female character is killed, maimed, or traumatized or whatever, for the sake of developing or motivating a male character. Think of Riko to Geto, even though that's not the best example ever. Nayuta could have been a good character. I think the claim that she was already great is disingenuous or just a lie. The exterior to Nayuta's character was only vaguely established. Denji transferred all his love from Makima to Nayuta. The beginning of part 2 had multiple mentions of a devil's nature. How many times does Asa bring up the fact that Yoru can't understand something because she's a devil? The opening volume literally says humanity is at war with the devils. All of this could be the thematic basis for what Nayuta grapples with. Her own dialogue feels like it's going in this direction. Talking with Lil D, she says the end of humanity sounds interesting, but she also doesn't want the different things she likes to disappear. Why couldn't Nayuta be at war with herself? Why couldn't Nayuta struggle with the devil's impulses, trying to gain her humanity and live a normal life? It could be great writing that parallels Denji's own conflict and journey. There were very brief and very vague allusions to this development in her backstory, but the fact is evident. This quote-unquote character is not a character. It is safe to say this development, this plot point, is Fujimoto's in part 2's first huge mistake. This detracts from the quality of part 2 so much, it is hard to ever think part 2 is around the same quality as part 1. However, there are 3 huge ball-dropping developments in part 2 that completely kill the quality for me. Let's get into it. I wanted to skip over this ageless world entirely because it fills me with bad memories. People assuming Rize was going to come back, Denji's dialogue, and the corny solution to beat the aging devil entirely. We also get more sex shock value because, yeah. I also want to remind everyone how Yoru had access to this tank and gun power for the entirety of part 2. She only just now chose to use it, which is fair and I'm not faulting her, but just remember again, she could have gotten this strong whenever she wanted to. For all intents and purposes, this was an arbitrary power-up. Because she could have gotten it literally whenever, it means it's random. And it sucks that it puts her above Chainsaw Man, able to one-tap him again whenever she wanted. But let's move on. I want to also mention the whole ageless world thing started in chapter 180. It ends in 190. The entire point of it was for Denji to mature emotionally and mentally to beat the aging devil. The solution is just eating the aging devil, then making a contract with it. That shit is so lame and so boring and so benign. Why the fuck did we spend 11 chapters on this nonsense? Whatever, bro, just kick that shit to the curb. Chapter 191 opens up with Yoshida telling us everything that went on. Yoru reveals that she is the war devil and Asa's other personality to Denji in the group ski. Yoshida tells Yoru that he would like her to turn Denji into a weapon as soon as possible in order to stop the death devil from destroying everyone. We then get one of the worst cliffhangers to ever grace the face of the earth, and with that, we stop there for the aging devil arc. If you could not tell, this arc in my opinion is bad, very bad. Too many weak points, too many bad decisions, and one of the worst plot points in the story are all dropped right here. I will admit this arc does have cool fights and is definitely the best action wise, but come on. I cannot look at the writing here and come to the conclusion this is a solid web of plot. To me, it feels like Fujimoto wanted to kill off Nayuta and have Denji get over it in the same arc, as if that could ever work out. I do not like this arc. On reread, I realize how bad this arc truly is, but I feel like so many things I brought up during my coverage are inarguable. I do not like what I see, and Fujimoto will pay. We have finally come to 192. This is my least favorite chapter of Chainsaw Man. This chapter activated a chip inside my brain that made me start being a lot more critical of Chainsaw Man Part 2. There is something fundamentally wrong with this chapter that I cannot explain. When you actually read the chapter, it is pretty benign all things considered. Despite that, when I read it for the first time, something snapped, something inside of me. Consider this, right? I defended Fujimoto throughout all of chapter 167 and 170, but this chapter made me do an entire chapter review just to talk about how I feel. I still remember the gut-grinding feeling of making that video. It felt like I was betraying who I was. Here's some clips of that video because I still stand by what I said and how I fundamentally felt. Chainsaw Man has been really testing me as a fan these last few months. When it comes to the hand job incident, then Nayuta suddenly being killed, when I put a lot of faith into a character especially, then Denji uses his stomach to beat the aging devil. Then this chapter. I do not want to see Yoru only like Denji because of Asa, and as a result take away all the anticipation I put into the characters. It feels very cheap. Moreover, because the relationship between Yoru and Denji feels extremely weak, it feels like something matter-of-factly and tacked on simply because Denji likes Asa. The only things I want to add from this video is how Denji himself is aware of the Fire Devil. The Fire Devil was masquerading as his Justice Devil to Yuko and the class president. The Fire Devil made contact contracts with over 250,000 people working for Lil D and Barham. Keep this in mind for 13 more chapters. I want you to also note that Yoru is saying the Death Devil will descend and high-ranking devils will greet her. This makes sense based on what Nayuta said earlier and what we can assume devil culture, etc. Yoru then tells Denji that if he beats the Death Devil, then she'll have sex with him. Meanwhile, Yoshida, Lodi, and Fumiko are sitting on a bench talking about how the Death Devil will descend in a month. Alright, two things to mention here. The first one being, what the hell is the time discrepancy in this story? Chapter 146 has Barham say in 6 months the Death Devil will descend. The same day, Denji gets captured by public safety and wakes up likely a week later. The breakout happens, a day or so goes by, then we have the whole aging arc. Then another day goes by. That catches up to this moment, so what the fuck do you mean 5 months have passed? That sounds ridiculous. Number 2, Lil D, Fumiko, and Yoshida are sitting together. Not only that, they are chilling with Denji. Wait, no. Denji was chilling with them. Yoshida was part of the organization that killed Nayuta and was more than complicit. Fumiko literally left Nayuta to die, in which Denji likely saw. And Lil D ordered Barham to turn Denji back into Chainsaw Man, which would kill Nayuta, which Denji is aware of. Why the fuck are these character actions not tying into their interactions? Over a year ago, a dude on Reddit said something like, characters in Chainsaw Man aren't characters, they're just mouths for Fujimoto to talk through and bodies to abuse. I'm slowly agreeing with this more and more, because how do you have 3 people completely complicit in your family's death sitting at the same table as you, and there's no conversation about that? Like I said though, Denji just moved on the same day he found out about Nayuta's death in the worst way ever. Going back to the main story, Lil D says they won't work with public safety and they want to participate at their school's festivities, I guess. We then see Yoru and Denji blowing down buildings, but for a moment Asa comes back. Asa wants to die and feels guilty because of Yoru's actions. She calls herself an idiot for ever thinking she could be friends with the devil. She also says Yoru is planning something worse than humanity's extinction. Asa's scared to die but wants to in order to stop Yoru and her actions. We then cut to the school we started in and meet a new student. Alright, the real Fami is here, and voila, she is so fucking funny. She's overly freaked out and makes her classmates uncomfortable. So much so they tell her to just go outside and start crushing ants. While outside, one of the students approaches her and tries to talk with her. Fami apparently thinks he is super struggling and goes to literally kill him. Before this happens, a visage stands on top of a building claiming to hear the sounds of people in help. The visage claims to be Chainsaw Man. This is the Chainsaw Man that we saw in the Falling Devil arc. Fujimoto is paying off so many mysteries in this arc, right? Let's ignore how the speech patterns and dialogue doesn't necessarily match and how they look entirely different. Fake Chainsaw Man goes to attack Fami thinking she is the Death Devil, and he just tackles her. He is obviously surprised with how easy it was and questions if it was the right girl. He then says, we don't make mistakes. Again, a very weird dialogue choice that was not really implied before, but whatever. Fami touches the student with her hand and James Woods herself back to life. She then analyzes Chainsaw Man's fighting technique just to get gojoed once again. The entire scene is too funny, I can't lie to you. Moving on to more important bits, Fami reveals herself as Fami and Lil D comes to mark herself as the Death Devil. Let's run through everything Lil D explains to Fami and then we'll talk about Lil D. Lil D says, 1, the Death Devil born after her could just exterminate humanity if she could die. 2, she doesn't want to destroy humanity, but her powers will awaken no matter what and make her do it. And 3, she for some odd reason will not be eaten by Chainsaw Man. Maybe because she doesn't want to not exist, who knows. Lil D then uses Fami and fake Chainsaw Man as pawns to terrorize humanity. Alright, let's get into Lil D as the Death Devil. I was not trying to hide her real identity throughout this video, but this doesn't really work for me as a plot point. When this first came out, I was surprised but not very shocked, meaning I think the plot twist lacks a lot of shock value personally. It isn't very cathartic or shocking. When you look back at part 2, what clues point you in the direction of the Death Devil being this woman? I don't think there's any foreshadowing, simply because there's not any exclusivity that locks down this woman as any odd or enigmatic figure with more up her sleeve. Her not answering how she knows the details of Denji's contract or just saying her powers are secret aren't what I would consider foreshadowing or any type of exclusivity. A lot of people think Fujimoto hid it from us in plain sight, but what was he actually hiding? Yuha was hiding in plain sight. The world of One Piece was hiding from us in plain sight. Is it okay to assume she was deaf the entire time because because she hung her head a little funny, because she had a guillotine as a cursed spirit, because she was standing on the railing ominously. These things aren't clues you can go back on and go, oh, this was planned the entire time. Spoilers for the most spoiled anime ever, Zeke's mom Dina being the smiling titan was obviously planned, obviously makes sense, and covers up many contrivances and plot holes for the series. I'm not saying this twist creates plot holes, but I am saying there's really no evidence to boot this twist up anywhere. It feels very shoehorned in. Like, imagine for a second, right? Imagine the Fami devil was actually the Death Devil, and Lil D was actually Fami and she never lied about that. What would actually change? Like, tell me, what would change? The story would pretty much be the same, and it would be a little better because Fami is incredibly likable. Their motivations are still the exact same, and I don't think the story at large would be much different. The only thing that would literally change is the fandom trying to artificially assert that a twist makes perfect sense, even though there's no real foreshadowing for it. This is one of those huge ball drops I mentioned earlier. The twist for me hurts the quality of the story because Lil D is not a real character in the slightest. I don't know how you turn a random side character that had a hand in everything in the plot into this huge figure that we're all working to defeat, but then no drama, no character writing, no anything comes from it. Where's her arc, Polly? Furthermore, what we have here, we just have to assume that Lil D is just gonna awaken, but hopefully, maybe, by a prayer of God, Denji and Yoru could stop her on some Naruto and Sasuke shit. Considering how Yoru and Denji got pieced by the aging devil, ever thinking they could beat you at your strongest is as stupid as shit, but whatever. We then cut to Asa and Denji's last conversation on screen together. This is probably whatever, let's move on. It's just Asa saying how Denji made herself feel better with all the people she killed. It is a pretty interesting conversation. Moving on, Yoru and Denji are shooting at the fake Chainsaw Man when the real fake Chainsaw Man shows up at their doorstep. The fake Chainsaw Man says that the hero of hell shouldn't be riding with the girl and deflects Yoru's attack. I definitely think it makes sense how a bum with a fraction of the real Chainsaw Man's power could deflect an attack that did this to Chainsaw Man, but sure. Fake Saw asks Denji if he's aware of the mistake he's made. Let's skip over some chapters because genuinely nothing happens and it's like 50 pages of Fujimoto just rubbing his boom boom all over the screen. The point is, Denji beats Fake Saw and what emerges from his body is the Fire Devil. You guys have to feel me more than skin on this. I believe since the first two arcs that the Justice Devil was going to be one of the most important characters or things in the story, period. I thought Fujimoto setting up the Justice Devil in the first chapter was just another clever nod to how he likes to do things. Fujimoto then wrote Yuko as the main antagonist for the first arc and specifically warned Asa not to make a contract with the Justice Devil, who is at their school, not in their city or prefecture or whatever, at their school. Asa then says she does not know what is right or wrong anymore, and that is the reason why she cannot turn Denji into a weapon. There's an imbalance of justice in her heart. When this direction was changed from the Justice Devil to the Fire Devil, I was locked the fuck in. This meant that Lil D was in cahoots with the Fire Devil and is subtly manipulating things for the story. Beyond that, this meant the Fire Devil was important to the story, and all those smaller hints I was picking up on were all relevant. I was thinking, of course the Fire Devil is relevant. This is the same guy who wrote the Gun Devil twist. When I saw Denji ask Yoru about the Fire Devil, I was like, hold up, his writing is fire? Dude, I knew something big was coming. The fake Chainsaw Man was one mystery for part 2 that everyone was dialed in for. Considering it was how Fujimoto decided to end the first arc of the series, we were all excited to say the least. The guy who told everyone he was going to be Chainsaw Man through the Justice Devil, I don't think anyone believed him and took what he said literally. We all thought that was just a gimmick or something. The fake Chainsaw Man itself took a backseat during the church arc and aging arc, but it's not like their relevance was just gone. They still had importance just off the fact that everyone was mimicking the fake Chainsaw Man gimmick. So picture this, right? Imagine two things that have almost nothing to do with one another end up being revealed to be the exact same thing. Word to Allah, what the fuck is this twist? Fake Saw Man and the Fire Devil were never connected. Nothing about them spelled connected except for the innocuous detailing of the contracts being from the Fire Devil. Nothing about these two concepts screamed that they were connected or the same thing. The problem with this though is that we have to ask ourselves why. Why does Fake Saw go to kill Yuko? Why did they do that? Why did Fake Saw try to help Denji escape and presumably give him blood? This just makes the previous arc infinitely more convoluted. The Fire Devil is working with Lil D, so why would he help Denji stop the Falling Devil's plan if they're all working together and they're all on the same team? Do you see what I mean? This also brings up a case of causality here in character actions. The Fire Devil has killed over 350,000 people. Over 350. You can't even think of 350,000 people. That number is so big. If you got that wired into your bank account, you could move to Thailand and get wet and wild. I take issue with Fujimoto not writing character actions to matter in the story and how people interact with other characters. Denji, bro. All three of these people you are just now chilling with and eating your fucking cake just killed your little sister. Do not chop it up with them, bro. Fujimoto, the Fire Devil killed 250,000 people. Do not treat them like a fucking saint or a misguided hero. This reminds me of Dexter Season 2. The writers fucked up by involving Lila into the stuff with Dokes. You cannot combine two separate plot threads that have literally nothing to do with one another outside of vague, innocuous hints or symbolism. The Fire Devil's involvement makes past arcs infinitely weirder, contrived, and obviously convoluted. But let's look at the fake Chainsaw Man. The fake Chainsaw Man wanted to help out Denji and went out of his way to kill Yuko. But this other Chainsaw Man seemingly wants his revenge on Denji and uses innocent people to harm him? What? Okay, imagine you come up with a counter argument that he helped Denji in the Falling Devil arc because he wanted to take revenge on him later. That doesn't make any sense either. Taking revenge doesn't imply I want to duel you and have a fair 1v1 on some fucking Thorfinn shit. No, it does not imply that. He could have worked with the Falling Devil, revived Denji, fought him right there, killed him right there if he wanted to, or just work with the Falling Devil and say, yeah, we're gonna work together, I'll handle Denji, you get Asa. It could have been like that if he wanted revenge. Nothing about revenge when he says it implies he wants a fair 1v1 and wants to beat him at his best. It's not fucking Luffy versus Katakuri. Nothing about that is congruent. These two fake Chainsaw Mans are entirely separate and contradict one another's actions, which obviously makes you think, what if these guys are two separate people? That obviously cannot be the case when you look at the writer's intentions as well as how there's so little context to make that work. You know what I think? Hint, it's Isayama's favorite word. Fujimoto retconned this entire mystery, either intentionally or otherwise. To me, this is a retcon because the character actions, motivations, and mysteries cannot be congruent with any story Fujimoto wanted to tell here. But guess what? The cherry on top of this shit sundae is the fact that the Fire Devil straight up dips after talking with Denji. Fujimoto set up this entirely elaborate mystery with a fake Chainsaw Man, combined it with something that is completely unfitting and unnatural, then he threw it all away after briefly addressing it and drawing one of the worst 50-page fights ever seen in manga. When you look at the Fire Devil's main commodity in part 2, outside of killing strangers and ruining the lives of innocents, it is to tell Denji to choose between two options. How the fuck does a Fire Devil begin to know what two options are? Like dead ass. How can you see the fucking future all of a sudden? Before we close this out, I want to mention how I predicted this. I didn't literally predict all these events, but I predicted the importance of the Fire Devil and the importance of Denji having to choose between two options. And we just established the Fire Devil is only in the story to make Denji choose between two options, but imagine that. Imagine me predicting what was going to happen in the story and then me seeing that prediction come to life, but in the worst way fucking possible, like a Frankenstein mutation monster of my prediction. Imagine how I feel. So imagine that feeling. Of course, this would be one of the biggest ball dropping things ever, because you're showing me the reader is right for picking up on these hints, but you're not actually making it cathartic or satisfying in any way possible. And that's the overall problem with part 2 in general. He's one of the worst additions in the story of Chainsaw Man. To say I hate this is an understatement. The Fire Devil is a garbage plot point. The fake Chainsaw Man is a terrible mystery. Both of these things should have never existed if they were going to be combined for the most lackluster and corny resolution ever. It isn't even like a resolution. There was nothing done here. And did I mention how stupid it is for the Fire Devil to be killing one of the people that are contracted with the Fire Devil as if it wasn't explicitly stated they get stronger with more contracts? Like, again, bro, what the fuck? Moving on. Fujimoto just doesn't know how to write.
Just playing the game with your fucking dicks in your hands, bro. Like, pay attention.
Back to the main story. Yoru got her ass handed to her by the Falling Devil. Denji tries to step up, but the Falling Devil does the same to Denji. Again, Lil D, your minion took out the guys you're banking on. Why the fuck do you think they can beat you? So on their ass, Denji and Yoru have swords in their body. The Falling Devil says she doesn't remember the War Devil being this weak, and then it happens. Yoru perception blitzes the Falling Devil and remembers nuclear warheads. She then screams about how she loves America for creating nuclear warheads from scratch. When this chapter came out, everyone's having a good time. This is Fujimoto's last crack at America, and it was pretty funny overall. After the shock value and bias wore off on me, I realized this is one of the worst chapters in manga history. Let me explain. Flashback to chapter fucking 1 of part 2. Yoru literally says in black and white text that she wants to make Chainsaw Man vomit nuclear warheads. She later says how when he ate a piece of her, she became weaker and war has been delegated to video games and such. She laments how she does not want to be forgotten because of Chainsaw Man. She wants to make him spit up nuclear warheads so she could be the more fearsome devil. Her entire character motivation was to make him spit it up so she could be remembered and restore a core part of her identity, which is a sub-theme in part 2. So guess what? Fujimoto forgot this, then just gave it back to her in the most lazy way ever that turned Yoru into Super Hitler. Guys, this is bad writing 101. We cannot excuse it just because it's Chainsaw Man. Fujimoto wrote a character motivation which is entirely thematically connected, then he just wrote the character being gifted their goal. What the fuck is that? There's no catharsis there, it just happened off screen and is the second random arbitrary power up that Yoru gets. This writing doesn't surprise me anymore because Fujimoto already dicked me down with that Fire Devil John. Of course he would deliver the 1-2 punch just handing Yoru her motivation, but guess what? It is not over. To make matters worse, Lil D kidnaps Denji and tells him some crucial information. Our friend Lil D tells us that Yoru's plan is to erase the concept of death and turn the world into a never-ending World War II. Yoru is so much stronger than the literal Death Devil now, based off this one contrivance that she changed the fucking future and thereby negated Nostradamus' prophecy. Okay, there are multiple clear reasons why this is bad. In one chapter, Fujimoto changed the entire direction of the story. Literally everything with the prophecy just didn't matter because of this. Let me remind you guys on how integral this was for the story of part 2. Yoshida brings up the idea of Denji eating the Death Devil for them, and this was to stop mankind from being erased. He then brings it up to Lil D in the cafe. Lil D had the whole Falling Devil John in order to make Asa and Yoru prepared to deal with it. Nayuta then says she can tell the Death Devil will descend because they are sisters. Yoshida and Fumiko talk with Lil D arguing that the Death Devil will descend in 1 month and they need to work together. The entire reason Fami came down from hell was to stop the Death Devil from descending. Fujimoto is trying to tell you right now that none of that ever mattered. But wait. Flashback to the cafe. Yoshida says because of the prophecy, public safety had inmates make contracts with the future devil to let them know when they would die. 7 of them died around the time they made contracts, but 23 of them, aka the vast majority, all died in July, which is when the Death Devil would descend. That means Fujimoto did it again? No, he couldn't have done it again. He retconned a whole other plot point again? We know from part 1 that the future cannot be changed, period. Despite that, those 23 convicts that were supposed to die in July, which is when the Death Devil would descend, could not die because of death being erased. So what the fuck do you mean? The future devil practically told us that the Death Devil would descend and it was a plot development promised to us by the writer, but he literally retconned it and changed the entire story on a whim using a comedic chapter. This is exactly what I mean, dog. I had expectations for a certain thing in the story, but not only can Fujimoto not cash in on them, he just ruins them. I know Fujimoto can write these things. For God's sakes, this is the same man that foreshadowed the end of part 1 before he wrote a single fucking chapter. So why does he do this for part 2? Why does he just disregard these mysteries and plot points that readers passing look forward to? Just put this into perspective for a minute, man. We were told 23 out of 30 people would die in July because of the future devil, and we were also told that the same day the Death Devil is supposed to descend, Lil D has her festival activities. We know right before Lil D's death that the festival is going to take place later. So it's literally impossible for those 23 people to die because death as a concept is erased before the day of the prophecy. So what the fuck do you mean? The future devil either lied or this entire thing got retconned. If you can somehow stomach it, this is not the worst thing that takes place in this school. We get 8 shots of Lil D's underwear and then we see Denji alone resting before their plan that he wasn't listening to. They somehow had 3 strategies, but I do not know what they could ever be. Fumiko shows up and just starts chatting to Denji. Fumiko's plan is just the opposite of Lil D's plan in general. Fumiko is trying to have Denji eat death while Lil D is trying to stop Yoru from erasing her. This is off script. How does Fumiko know that Lil D is the Death Devil? Chapter 213 comes in and we see Yoshida outside with pizza and drinks for Denji. They eat for a bit and Yoshida remembers all the good times he had with Denji. He then says he came to see Denji because he will never be able to see him again. Denji says thanks for all the free food and Yoshida says his role is to be a switch. Yoshida blows himself up. Alright. Yoshida blowing himself up was my final straw in the manga. This is when I knew my manga was washed and my mangaka lost all his sauce. Fujimoto said before part 2 started that he was excited to draw Yoshida. Yoshida appears in the second chapter of the part before the main freaking character. Despite all that, Yoshida's friendship with Denji is literally off-screen. There are 3 reasons why this entire thing is pretty bad. 1. We do not know why Yoshida is so loyal to public safety. There is no backstory to fund an idea that he owes them a big debt or that he feels like they're necessary evil. None of it. 2. Yoshida is not a character. Partially related to the last point, Yoshida just doesn't have enough characterization to ever call him a real character. Who is Yoshida is never answered. 3. Yoshida should not be that important to Denji. Yoshida works for the people that cut off Nayuta's head and is directly complicit in her murder. Additionally, he cut off his fake girlfriend's arm. Why is Denji so buddy-buddy when he was willing to kill this nigga a week ago? Not only that, in Denji's mind, he killed Nayuta. This whole plan to bring out Black Chainsaw Man is stupid as fuck. Again, it ignores the character actions because I would never be able to be cool and shout the dude who works for the people that killed my sister, let alone killed my sister. It's really just stupid shit and just one big contrived mess when I think about it. Denji was going to blast this guy's face off about a week ago, but now when he blows up and gets his body torched in front of him, that triggers the same reaction as Nayuta's death. I just don't get it. You know, Yoshida's the reason why Nayuta's dead to begin with, right? Like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Some people excuse this death with it's Chainsaw Man, people drop dead all the time. But no dog, this character did not exist as a character to us. He was a plot device with more steps. I have watched these 2 Yoshida videos and I promise to fucking god, these white niggas love headcanon. They're solid videos on their own, but in my opinion, they do not articulate any rationale for how this character was intended to be seen. Yoshida sucks. He was my 3rd straw. And considering what we get after this, it only makes sense. I wanted to make these final chapters its own section because I've come to realize how Fujimoto does it. He puts tricklets of good concepts and fitting writing into his manga, but when you actually break it down and look how it integrates into the story at large, it doesn't work. I will get into exactly why I think this way, but it took me a while to figure it out. Fujimoto carefully spaces out his letdowns and disappointments so readers don't feel too enticed to jump ship. He cleverly puts things that are congruent with the story in character so we feel like there's an actual progression and congruent with the story. However, the quality of what we see is just not good, and I'll explain in great detail. We kick off this finale with Pochita, Lil D, and Fami staring at Yoru's grand entrance. Yoru says she only wants to fight Chainsaw Man as she believes they are tied 1-1. Yoru says if she loses, she'll leave the world alone, and obviously if she wins, she'll just turn Chainsaw Man into a weapon and enact her evil naked plans. The fight starts and they just blitz past each other. Fujimoto only knows how to draw these fake ass shishi suns, but obviously Oda has been doing it better for 20 years. Another note to make is how the lore of Chainsaw Man is how he fought the 4 horsemen at the same time and escaped after getting injured. Yoru reveals she put on Makima where she cannot die because of her contracts. We get this weirdly exciting panel and then Asa makes a comeback. Asa takes over Yoru and shoots herself in the head. There are a couple problems with this beat of the story. 1. Yoru and Asa share a brain, so if Asa was thinking something, Yoru should be able to know exactly what she was planning. Because she would know what Asa is planning, why would she ever relinquish any control over the body? This is why the mechanics are so shite. There is no basis for control. Asa and Yoru can just do whatever they want. At the beginning of this fight, Lodi and Yoru agree that Lodi is much stronger than her. If so, why doesn't Lodi just zap away Yoru's consciousness again and kill Asa? Why wasn't that one of the 3 plans? You see what I mean, right? If this fight was going to be 16 chapters, Fujimoto should at least have thought how to make sense of it all. Anyway, the gang all tag team her and we see Chainsaw Man absolutely steal the show. Yoru puts herself back together and saves Lodi's life. After that realization, Yoru turns Lodi into a weapon, but Chainsaw Man eats her first. Pochita erases the concept of death. Now, this is weird as hell. We have to ask before literally anything, why the fuck did Pochita eat death? I understand the situation was dire, but the entire point of Yoru's plan was to use you to erase death and create her perfect world. You just accomplished half of it for her. And please do not even think of using the argument that Pochita didn't know. Pochita basically basically knows everything that Denji does. They share a heart, which is in a convoluted way confirms that Pochita shares some weird and vague consciousness with Denji. This is just confirmed by 231. There is absolutely zero benefit in eating death right here. I cannot begin to think why he would do this. The choice was to give Yoru a new sword or give her the perfect world she wants. I do not know why the latter is more appealing. Imagine Pochita can barf up Lodi. Will she not just be dead? Half her body is cut up and she is not a hybrid. This would mean her powers would awaken immediately and slaughter all of humanity. So again guys, what the fuck was Pochita thinking? Unless, okay? All of this was one calculated and contrived measure to just have the perfect ending the writer wants, regardless of it fitting or having any character motivation or any IQ feat. Moving on, the fight continues and we get some pretty bad action. Just poor choreography for the final fight. Yoru says she is not the same as she fought Chainsaw Man and uses her devil army to attack him. I think you would have to work some heavy mental gymnastics for this to prove who's the more formidable devil, but whatever. Chainsaw Man runs through them all and Yoru develops a Michigan sword. This sword instantly gets retconned to Oregon as Fujimoto can't remember what he drew in the last 2 weeks. Yoru bisects Chainsaw Man with her sword, but he instantly regenerates. He then uses her big boy attack and hollow purples Chainsaw Man. As she goes to turn him to a weapon, Denji awakens from Chainsaw Man and revs his engine. Denji trolls Yoru for a bit, runs away saying to give back Asa's body or else all her friends will be eaten. Yoru, frustrated, puts up her hands to deliver an attack. This cliffhanger right here is likely the funniest. Like I said, by carefully placing the letdowns, we don't feel too burdened by his constant pump fakes. Do you know how many American flags there are? I am sure there are a couple American flags in a couple Japanese high schools for studying or whatever. Every school I've ever been at has always had American flags. You do not need to bait the reader with traveling to the fucking moon, especially when you have shown you can make Michigan disappear. If the world was gonna get reset anyway with a couple of chapters, just turn the moon into a fucking spear. Like, what? Whatever, bruh, whatever. Denji is running away from the homing spear and he reveals something big. When Denji said he would work with Lodi, she gave him a bunch of devil pawns that she had. She gave him these devils before Fumiko's introduction, before Yoshida blew himself up, and before Pochita took over, but apparently he just had them in his bag the entire time. This was never once alluded to, or established, or set up, but sure. In fact, the only interaction I could see it reasonably happening was off screen. So yeah, again, cleverly spaced out nonsense, but since it's already the climax, you might as well see it through. Denji then says, give Asa's body back or else shit will get wicked. Yoru hits Denji with a motorcycle and makes him barf up the devils he's eaten. Denji flees to hell to eat more devils and to mess up Yoru's world. Yoru tosses Denji into this weird river, but then she gets confronted by the locust devil. This devil absolutely puts belt to ass on these dudes. You know Fujimoto can't write because like 40 chapters ago he had this attack in the manga, but now a stronger Yoru just gets folded by some random fodder. Bum. Man, W writing, man, W writing. It also doesn't matter to begin with and is just vague foreshadowing for the end of the world. Asa helps Denji defeat the devil before he's eaten. Yoru then takes over the body again and shoots Denji square in the chest. Denji tries to run away, but Yoru follows on her motorcycle. Denji, desperately looking for blood, barfs up this chicken. This chicken reminds Yoru of Bucky and she swerves out of the way, crashing a motorcycle against the pole. Denji and Yoru explain that her new wound won't heal because her contract only works with attacks against her, not if she hurts herself. Alright, and with that, we're gonna stop right there for the coverage of this fight. This chapter had a collective groan from everyone. It is never once stated before this moment Yoru's contract only works when attacks are used against her. I have seen people try to semantic and defend this, but it will never work. Never. Never. Asa, who shares the same brain and body as Yoru, are constantly called each other's halves. Asa blew her shit clean off. How the fuck is that not an attack against herself? Yoru literally thinks of herself as Asa's other half, and so does Asa. Even if we magically semantic that, Yoru herself blows up her entire fucking body and has to regenerate from a chicken bone. If she cannot regenerate from attacks where she hurts herself, a nuclear punch she detonated herself with the intent of blowing shit to smithereens should absolutely never heal her, right? Frankly, it is just lazy writing, but even more than that, let's talk about why she decided to destroy the coop in the first place. To do that, we need to flash back a bit. At the beginning of this fight, Asa and Denji are talking to each other. If I ask Fujimoto right now, hey sensei, how are Asa and Denji talking to one another in this moment? He will give me the biggest waffle answer ever because there is absolutely no mechanic in the story that makes these two characters speak to one another. It is also not the same as the Makima-John because that entire thing was for dramatic and stylistic choices. There were still inside the apartment the entire time. Again, cleverly spaced out nonsense. I say clever because what we get here is actually pretty good, so I guess Fujimoto gave himself some leeway with that. Also remembers her dad's death and how it correlates with her dream. Essentially, her dream is a manifestation of the guilt she carries for her dad and her mother. It speaks on her perceived morality and how she doesn't know what is right and wrong. Asa's dream is her trying to forget and look to forgive herself for being so complicit in so many deaths. Asa tripping and falling in the main story is an outward manifestation of her inner conflict she is blocking off to perceive herself as a good person. It goes back to my favorite chapter. Denji, who is free from the conventions of moral choices, chooses a cat over any person. Asa will struggle with this choice and have to grapple with her morality. It is good character writing in isolation. Denji makes his choices even if they are wrong, while Asa cannot make a choice in fear of them being wrong. Denji inviting Asa to his world is trying to absolve her of her perceived sins and compel her to forgive herself. That is the intent behind this conversation. I think in Asa's mind, she cannot do it immediately, so she looks to sacrifice herself, but the intent is still there. You can also argue she believed that Yoru was basically pure evil and would never return her body, but let's not get too into that. Basically, this entire convo is really good. I can even forgive Fujimoto for retconning Denji's backstory, as he wasn't the one who made his father's death look like a suicide. It was the Yakuza so they could basically enslave Denji. However, this all relates back to chapter 228 and 229. Asa asks Yoru why she avoided the dove, and Yoru says it's because Asa hates when birds are killed. Yoru should not have swerved the coup to begin with because it is frankly impossible for anything to die at this time. Therefore, the bird would not have died. Even more than this, what type of semantics is this? Asa was going to lose her shit 100 chapters ago when Yoru attempted to turn Denji into a weapon. So imagine the bird wasn't there. She would just have killed Denji, which would obviously make her sad too. But this goes even further back because why birds? The image of Bucky was shown in their brains, but it was explicitly stated and basically confirmed that Asa wasn't upset that Bucky died. She was just upset that she would be judged for killing Bucky. So what the hell type of sense does that make? I need to say it again. I do not think Fujimoto reads or remembers his own manga. This all transitions into Yoru telling Asa that she tried to understand her and that Asa needs to let go of her guilt. Heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point. I think this would work better if Yoru was a real character, wasn't a Nazi, or expressed any care for Asa instead of constantly sexually assaulting her. This also confirms what Asa said so many times ago. Yoru cannot understand what she does because she is the devil. Every time this was said, it was done in a very coping manner, but Yoru apparently confirms this was true the entire time. I thought Nayuta and the Angel Devil as characters existed to show how devils and humans aren't foreign to one another and they can understand each other. This page shits all over that if you take it literally, but you need to take it literally before you derive the intent behind Asa's character. Yoru's character here just amounts to a psychopath who can't understand others and does things as a complete hedonist regardless of it fucking up other people's lives. Despite that, she kept Asa alive and wants to free her from her guilt. I do not think you could spell narrative dissonance without Fujimoto. To make matters worse, Denji gives some of his blood to Yoru to revive her. Yoru should basically be at full HP because of her contract, but one little bump on the head turns her into a vegetable. I love the consistent power scaling here. Denji says he revived her because she said she would have sex with him. Yoru finds him amusing and then they call a truce. Yoru says she'll allow him to have sex with her and Asa gives her consent. For fucking sure. Denji celebrates as a horde of insect devils come to eat them. Fumiko explains that the devils are super powerful because death is no longer a thing, and that is pretty much it for this final fight. This final fight obviously leads to the final chapter, which is the most important chapter in the series. We are all super aware that the final chapter in the series resets the timeline, where Chainsaw Man never existed. I guess now is as good as any to talk about this. There are so many narrative flaws within this one story decision. I truly cannot believe the author I swore up and down on could do this. Alright. Number 1, this timeline reset could never happen to begin with. Many people have noticed this before the final chapter even came out. Pochita eating Chainsaw Man would never reset any timeline or universe. That is just nonsensical. When Pochita ate Nazis, it didn't spawn a world without Hitler or World War II. It just erased people's memories of it. When ears, legs, teeth were eaten, literally nothing got reset or exchanged. People just forgot. If Pochita eats himself so Chainsaw Man would be forgotten, it would not just create a whole new fucking world. that literally makes no sense. To me, that is an obvious retcon of Pochita's ability. So to begin with, this chapter should have never happened. Denji apparently survives by drinking blood. This only works with devils and specifically hybrids, another retcon on how things work. I'm so surprised. Nayuta is also Nayuta in this timeline, which should not be the case, at least in my opinion. Ishibe says that Makima only turned out like that because Makima was raised by the government. Nayuta should also be like Makima because she is raised by the government. This either means one or two things. Fujimoto forgot this line and just wrote Nayuta as a head because he wanted to, or two, Fujimoto wrote Nayuta here, but it's not the same because Nayuta is a child and Makima is a woman. However, number 2 just confirms that she will turn into Makima eventually because public safety is subsidized by the government. This is just incredibly weird and forced by Fujimoto. Pick your poison for that. Nayuta being here still is a problem. The next bit is with Asa. Denji goes to save Asa and people think this is such a great and symbolic thing when no. Denji chose Chainsaw Man over his family Nayuta. Here, he is choosing to save Asa over quote-unquote Chainsaw Man. I understand that was the intent, but if the character can only develop and choose the right option by forgetting all his actions, that is not real. In order for a real character to have a real arc, they have to understand why they were wrong and atone in some way. Imagine if Zuko made the worst decisions of his life, never said sorry, never repented, and the timeline got reset so he would just be forced not to make those bad decisions anymore. That is just not real, man. How could I ever appreciate that from any level? It gets even worse when you look at the writing. So first off, the entire point of part 1 stressed that a normal life needed bad things. A normal life necessitates bad things because that is why good things are good. We can keep on dreaming as long as good things exist. Do you guys understand that resetting the timeline means this message is literally never learned? It completely removes this message, which was such an important thing for Denji's character. Fujimoto not only erased it by resetting the timeline, uprooted it by making Denji forget this. It is such an objectively bad narrative decision. There are even more narrative flaws though. I have been saying this since the dawn of time. Narrative setups deserve payoff. Please tell me what is the point in building up Asa and Denji's dynamic if they literally go nowhere in the end. There is an arc called Dating Denji where they went on multiple dates together. People refer to Denji as Asa's boyfriend. They've kissed multiple times. Denji wants a girlfriend. Asa says she could have had a boyfriend if she lived her life differently. For God's sakes, as Asa is metaphorically dying, she literally says she's desperate to connect and share her soul with one person. Why write all of this just to end the story in a flat and benign way? All of the setup between Asa and Denji goes literally nowhere. The functional equivalent to this would be building up Gojo and Sukuna fighting just for Sukuna to get one shot by Yuki's black hole no homo. This is bad for all types of reasons. It is just terrible writing. The cherry on top of this shit sundae is the fact that Asa is going to die soon. Flashback to the beginning of part 2. Asa was killed by the class prez after she made a contract with the Justice Devil. In this timeline, the Fire Devil still exists, most likely. The Fire Devil is still making contracts, most likely. The class prez was already obsessed with Asa because Mr. Tanaka liked her. Mr. Tanaka is dead in this chapter, sure, but more than likely class prez still made the contract with the Justice Devil. I can substantiate a lot of these things happening with the fact that Asa was going to trip and fall and kill Bucky. The only reason she tripped in the original timeline was because the class prez made her trip because she was jealous. If Asa trips here, that means Prez is still jealous and still wants to fuck up her life, meaning Asa's life is still in Asa's life is still in major jeopardy because class prez wants to kill her and likely will because she knows where Asa lives. The timeline reset literally did nothing, dog. Denji is still super guilty for killing his father. He is still living a terrible life of being a dog for public safety who's not immortal this time around, unless Fujimoto wants to retcon that too. He is still a crazy sex-obsessed idiot who has the perspective of a pervert and rapist, and he doesn't even know how to swim. I want to take some time in this section to talk about Fujimoto the writer and how this part was written. We all know the infamous quote, "If Hitler had Fujimoto's PR, we would all be Nazis today." This gets truer and truer by the day, I fear. Fujimoto has literally shot on a plate in this ending and people are genuinely celebrating it. To me, it doesn't seem like Fujimoto wanted to write a plot this time around. It just seems like he wanted to fuck off and do whatever. So because it feels like that, I think it's best to quickly compare part 1 to part 2. When it comes to the side characters, Himeno is infinitely better written compared to anyone we see in part 2. Yoshida is not a real character because the writer did not write him. Fami only existed for funny moments in a kawaii design. Fumiko is an expedition chimp, and nobody even remembers Yuko. Himeno always captivated me as a character. Her backstory, motivations, and dynamics were conveyed in an incredibly efficient way. Her death is able to be cathartic despite the limited time we spend with her, because Fujimoto made sure we understood the character and why she was a character. When it comes to everyone in part 2 that isn't one of the 2 main characters, they are effectively all plot devices with extra flair. Yoshida's friendship with Denji literally got off screen, meaning he could have been literally anyone. It didn't need to be Yoshida, it could have been a new person. Fumiko could have also been anyone. Why should I care about Lil D or Fami except for my reader's knowledge that they're the horsemen and should be narratively important? The same idea goes into the fights. There's not one fight in all of part 2 that is better than the snowball fight. I know that is a high bar to clear, but Fujimoto doesn't even come close to clearing it. Even in plot development, it was constantly established that Makima knew more than everyone that she wasn't normal and that she had something up her sleeve at all times. That ended up being paid off in pretty much the most perfect way possible. On the other hand, I can't even get any payoff for the prophecy of Nostradamus. Denji's dream in part 1 is so much better than Asa's. Asa's arc being don't worry, be happy right before it all got reset is so dull and deflating to me. If you could tell, I do not like anything about part 2. Let me actually read off exactly how I feel about part 2. Interspersed with interesting ideas and moments, but ultimately far too half-baked and monotonous for me. I really admire the vision and the concepts, but I don't think the story had enough sauce in the character writing, build-up, and moment-to-moment engagement to follow through and keep things fresh and sharp enough to portray what I was actually trying to portray, personally. But even if this was a miss for me, I'm very thankful to Fujimoto for his other works that have fulfilled me, and I look forward to whatever he writes next. Minus that last part, to be honest. The story of part 2 was so sauceless looking back at it. I didn't know how good I was eating with the snowball fight, Makima's character conclusion, the Darkness Devil, and Rize. Part 2's bitch ass has the aging arc. Like, come on, dude. This ending got me thinking, is this ending worse than Attack on Titans? I'm sure you all know how I despise Attack on Titans ending, and I think it's one of the worst endings ever. But when I think about it, I think this ending realistically gives AOT a run for its money. Constant retcons, unrealistic developments, and characters who get terrible and unfitting conclusions. Despite what I think the answer is, I am immeasurably disappointed with part 2 and the ending. I think Fujimoto tricked us with a thin veneer of a good story, but consistently failed to deliver in multiple elements, to the point where the quality of the first half of the story is night and day with the second. Although I feel this way and gave multiple reasons and objective criticisms, if you like this story, I'm actually happy for you. I don't want to take anyone's enjoyment away. I only started recently disliking part 2 around November of last year, and for the last 5 months I've just been asking myself, is there something wrong with me? I was thinking that it must be my fault, as if I don't understand what's happening. I believe I probably cared too much, and maybe that's my problem. Alright, this is a... honestly, I don't remember the last time I wrote an outro, man, for like a long video. I'd kind of just spitball off the head. So I wrote some things down in my notes app on my phone that I'm going to talk about for the conclusion of this entire thing. And yeah, it's kind of just like things that I didn't really mention in full detail, or that I set up without really like slamming down. Number 1, the climax thing. Part 2's climax, I said it multiple times in the video, the quote-unquote climax. Climax, let's look up the definition of climax. Let's look it up. Definition, climax. Literary terms are going to change, but the most intense, exciting, or important point of something, a culmination or apex. Alright, define climax in a story. The peak turning point representing the highest moment of tension, drama, or emotional intensity where the protagonist directly confronts the main conflict. That's much better. That's much better. When you look at a climax, right? When you look at the climax of like Bleach, it's like Ichigo on a macro scale confronting the fear of death and the idea of mortality in Yuha. There is an obvious dramatic tension within him defeating and overcoming Yuha to the point where he needs help by a lot of other people that he changed along the way. You know, that he, like people that are intimately connected to him, or Hime, Aizen, you know, Renji. But when it comes to the Chainsaw Man quote-unquote climax, that just isn't a thing. That just isn't a thing. And it's because Denji isn't really a part of the climax for half of the quote-unquote climax, right? He's not really part of it. And I've been in conversation with Chainsaw Man fans where they say the final battle of this entire story is not supposed to be like tense. It's not supposed to be this big dramatic thing. And I'm thinking, okay, so if you think there was no dramatic tension writing at all, why should I feel engaged from this? Why should I feel engaged? Because look at the facts, right? Yoru got a random power-up. Yoru gets consistent random power-ups for the sake of the plot. And then after getting random power-up for the sake of the plot, she just has a fight where it's not dramatic, it's not tense, there's no hint of tension anywhere. It's just a joke fight. It's a satire of a fight. And if that's the point, I don't care. I don't care. Because that's not good. That's not good. How could it be a climax representing the height of the tension and drama and emotional intensity, but I don't feel anything from it? I think they're just two characters or two idiots bumbling around on the screen. That's what's happening, and if that's fun for other people, sure. But that's why I say it's not a climax for me. It's not. It's just not. When you look at the climax of Avatar, it's the most intense. It's incredibly intense. When you look at the climax of The Sopranos, it is literally it is the most tense and dramatic conflict you've ever seen in the story up to that point. It's like, no, why do I feel more tense and dramatic from the part 1 ending? And that leads me to my next point. Part 1 is it's not even comparing part 1 and part 2 to each other. Comparing part 1 and part 2 feels like throwing up and thinking that it's a good thing. You know, it's like a mental disorder. It's like throwing up and thinking, oh shit, I'm getting skinnier. That's what it's like. It's like something's mentally wrong. Because part 1, right? I just want to list a couple things. The Makima reveal, the idea that Makima's the control devil and has this like the story in the palm of her hands and manipulate everything. That is a great reveal. It was constantly set up, constantly alluded to, constantly in the story. It's literally, if someone says Makima being the control devil comes out of nowhere, they haven't seen any of it. No one has ever said that a day in their life. But if I point to, okay, well, Lil D being the death devil comes out of nowhere, you're not gonna say, no, it's not true. No, it's not true. You're not gonna have the same fire in your gut with how you would have the Makima John, because they're just differently written. They're not the same thing at all. They're just not. And then when it comes to Denji in his dream in the door, that is oh my god, that payoff had me shaking in my seat, bro. That was such a great. It was such a great reveal in all sense of the word. It was amazing, man. Final fight with Chainsaw Man, when he went to hell, when he was fighting the hybrids, when he was doing everything. It is so. Like, what's that one director? Christopher Nolan. Nah. It's like the one Batman editor. I don't know. It's one Batman director. It is literally cinema, bro. It is genuinely cinema. I've literally never read a fight like that. A fight in a manga, basically, where it's just this one Godzilla person beating up all these people. And even though we know they're way stronger, it's incredibly satisfying. You would have to harken back to like Sukuna versus Jogo for that stuff. But even that's a little weak. You know, like this is much different. Next, I'm going to talk about Haruka Isayumi. I think a lot of people kind of just think this is a drop plot point, and I was definitely going to mention how it's a drop plot point in the end of the story, toward the end of like the actual like finale coverage, but I didn't really know how to slot it in without it being weird, you know what I mean? But Haruka Isayumi is definitely a drop plot point. When you look at him as a character, he'd existed just to suck dick and do nothing, right? And that would be kind of antithetical to how he was portrayed in like the first half. He was introduced right after Famu was introduced, or right after Lodi was introduced. And he was supposed to be the fake Chainsaw Man. He was in the next arc. He had a lot of screen time in the next arc. He had multiple conversations with Asa. In his cuck chair, watching Denji and Asa when they were doing their thing. He even like he's working with Barum and Fami, or Lodi. He's working with Barum and Lodi, but then his narrative relevance goes where? Nowhere. And if you want to argue he was never narratively relevant, why does he have so much screen time? Why does he have so many different panels alluding to something bigger? He literally looks at Asa and says, that power or those scars, could it be? Like, what the hell does that mean? This is what the hell does that mean? You know, so Haruka Izumi is definitely a drop plot point or a drop story. It's not me reading into it too much, you know. It's like he obviously was intended to be something else, something bigger. It just doesn't do anything. There's no point for him to ever be in the story. Literally never. He's a joke of a character. When you look at like the part 1 functional equivalent, you have Kobani. Kobani is the functional equivalent of this Haruka Izumi. But not only does Kobani deliver like the main message that Denji has to learn, then forget at the end of part 1, Kobani is incredibly likable. We all love Kobani. We all love Kobani, bro. So we give her all the grace in the world. You know what I mean? It's like it's different, bro. And the thing is, right? Kobani was never built up as this character that was supposed to be important. Haruka was because multiple conversations with the main character, working with the main movers and shakers of the plot, and then having multiple different cuck moments where he's looking at Asa and going, could it be? He was definitely supposed to be something, but he was nothing. So Haruka is definitely a dropped idea in the story that I don't think anyone was going to defend. And when you look at Haruka, right? Haruka was one thing set up in the beginning that never panned out to anything else. You can't look at that in part 1. What does part 1 have? What is one thing part 1 sets up and doesn't really deliver on? I think the one thing you can say that part 1 sets up and doesn't deliver on is probably like, literally everything, man. Literally everything I could think of. There might be one little detail, some innocuous little mention, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, part 1 literally handles everything. Literally everything. While part 2 can't even get the prophecy right, part 2 can't get the fake Chainsaw Man right, part 2 can't get anything right. And I'm not even trying to dick suck, I'm just saying like, yeah, part 2 literally just can't cash in on these things that they set up. When part 1 can cash in on Makima, can cash in on Chainsaw Man, the Pochita, can cash in on the door stuff, can cash in on literally everything. Moving on, Asa not having an arc. That's what I wrote down. Yeah, Asa's character arc just essentially boiling down to don't worry, be happy, like I said, is kind of embarrassing. Because if you really pay attention, like that was a point, that was a part of her arc, right? The guilt that she carries, the emotional drive that she has, that was a part of the arc. But the main thing with Asa was always around connection, always around loneliness, always around not being like enough for someone else and having to flee and having to put a shield up. It was always about that. Even down to the first chapter of part 1, she's ridiculing other people for being together, for having each other. She was jealous of them. Asa's arc not really concluding or not really having any payoff where she accepts friendship from other people is silly. It doesn't work for me. The main thing with Asa was that she was interested in having a friendship, having someone to share, overcome the loneliness, but that doesn't feel like it happened, you know? I understand the symbolic purpose, with the whole Bucky thing, and Denji saved her, and now she's with the class and everything, she's chilling, she's coming out of her shell. That's only the step 1, bro. That's only step 1. Now, Bucky is, I guess she's kind of friends with Bucky now. I don't know how much stock I can put into that. I don't know if I can put in any stock into that, if I'm being honest. It seems like Asa's arc didn't really conclude the way Fujimoto intended for it to conclude. It concluded the way he ended up writing it. Now, and I mean that in the beginning, it was obviously set up to be like this, but as he wrote the character and as he got worse and worse at writing, it ended up this way because he had no other way to end it. He had no other way to push it. It's kind of like Attack on Titan in a lot of that ways. I take a lot of issue with the whole Bucky scene with Asa because, as I explained, Asa is going to die soon. And any reader with half a brain, like me, is going to know that Asa's going to die soon. Either from the prophecy that may or may not exist, who knows, or just from the Justice Devil still existing, her still tripping because of the class president, and the class president still being crazy. So Asa's still gonna die soon, maybe that same day. So what did Denji do? What was the actual goal? Because again, I can't prove that the Justice Devil is a thing. I can't prove that the class president made a contract with the Justice Devil. I just have the same congruence of the original timeline to go off of. And we know she made a contract, we know she was jealous, and we know she tripped her. So unless Fujimoto, it's really just that bad. You know, it's either Asa's gonna die or he just conveniently doesn't make things congruent with the original timeline whenever it conveniently benefits him. It doesn't really matter. The point is, I can't ever imagine this character being meant to be a real character. I I enjoy and admire the different character bits of her letting go of her guilt, but the guilt was never about the guilt was never at the forefront of her character. When you go back to the first 3 or maybe even 4 arcs of part 2, it's all about loneliness and connection. Literally every single beat. Of course, there's a subset of guilt and feeling bad for the things you've done, but that's not actually what's being portrayed in the foreground. So Asa doesn't work for me, and I don't think Asa works for a lot of people either. Nobody's saying Asa's such a good character. No, when the story ends, right? When a story ends and no one is saying this is such a good character or the main character is such a good character, you know you messed up. You know what I mean? Because when JJK ended, people were saying Yuji's a good character. I'm like, okay, I can understand that. It doesn't work for me, but I can understand that. When My Hero ended, nobody was saying Deku was a good character. Nobody. That sucks. And one of the main divisive parts about Attack on Titan's ending was the treatment of Eren. People to this day think Eren got assassinated and is one of the worst parts of the ending. I don't think Eren's the worst part of the ending, and I don't think Eren got quote-unquote assassinated. Anyway. Yeah, Lil D is not a character, and Yoshida. Oh man. I think Yoshida is one character that people have the wrong perspective on. I've watched several different Yoshida videos over my time of reading part 2, and I never felt like they were anything substantial. They didn't open my eyes. They didn't really talk about anything in a very, like, enlightening way. It really just seemed like people like Yoshida, so they artificially assigned depth to the character for whatever reason. It's deadass like a halo effect because he's like a handsome dude. It's genuinely a halo effect, and that's kind of unfortunate. I kind of feel bad because imagine one of the characters that you promoted, you got people excited for, end up being one of like the fakest characters ever because you forgot to write him. But he's so good looking, people just write him for you. A little embarrassing. I think the worst part about this whole Chainsaw Man John is how you can't really have any conversations with people. Yeah, I'm gonna actually put this in the I'm gonna put this in the description. I gotta make sure to put it in the description. There was the part 2 ending, like it's so hard to talk with people about like the ending, and this is a great example because the part 2 ending, it happened, right? We all know it's bad. This person, right, who is a fan of Chainsaw Man, they have I love Chainsaw Man in their bio, they made a theory, and they basically said, I know it's a kind of a crackpot theory, I know it's kind of stupid, I know people are gonna call it cope, and they basically said how this could all be a fake out, that it's all a dream world where it's not supposed to be real. And they use things like people saying it feels like fan fiction, they use things like Fujimoto retconning how the devil blood thing works. They use things like, shit like that, bro. They just say, they literally just spell out how, yeah, this is poorly handled, this doesn't make any sense, but maybe it's all part of the plan. It again ties into the whole, if Hitler had Fujimoto's PR, it ties in that whole thing, but essentially, people are so deluded that they will just make up anything to keep believing what they want to believe. What's this shit called? It's a fallacy. It's ad hoc rescue. It's ad hoc rescue where they want to hold on to the belief so bad they'll just keep making shit up. Alright, Loki gotta finish this. I got somewhere to be. But yeah, basically the whole thing is conversation about Chainsaw Man has gotten so corny and repetitive. It's genuinely impossible to have like a real conversation with somebody. You know, it's either you don't know how to read, it's either you don't know how to read, that was the point, dude, or just random ad hoc nonsense, like I just said with the whole Chainsaw Man thing. People have also said it's like a superhero critique or something, like it's a satire against superheroes. I'm like, how much do you guys want to like actually interpret on that? Like, how much, if you were to walk up to Fujimoto right now and say, was this a critique, a satire? How much money would you want to bet on him saying yes? Because I'll probably bet double on him saying no and him having no idea what you're talking about. So I had an idea for like a Patreon type of thing where it's going to be like, you guys can let me know if you're interested. I'm probably going to do it regardless, I can't lie. Where like for like $1 a month, I'll just make like podcasts where like folks can ask me questions. Folks can ask me questions of anything, any media I've seen, what's my favorite, how do I feel about stuff. It could get more personal, not too personal, you know what I mean? Like, let's not ask me for my full name and the govy and, you know, how many hoes I fuck on the daily, how much money I make, you know, how many cars I drive. Let's not ask all that, you know what I mean? But you can ask like literally anything, you know. I'm pretty normal. Like, I mean, I'm pretty much like the rest of you guys, except I'm not in high school. Yeah, you can ask me my favorite type of games, what I look to be when I'm older. Do I plan on doing YouTube forever? How I even got into YouTube? How to talk to women. You know, I'm not a fucking womanizer, or, you know, I'm not the best with women ever, but I think I know how to talk to women pretty well. I think I've learned pretty well how to talk to women. Literally anything, you know what I mean? Talk about basketball, talk about music, things like that. It could be like an hour and a half podcast, like an hour podcast where I just answer different questions like that. It could be literally anything from any, and I could go like in depth. Like, if you want me to go in depth, if you want to say like this, right? If you were to ask me, how do I feel about Luffy's role as the warrior of liberation in the story at large of One Piece, if you'd ask me that question, I'll go super in depth, saying exactly why I think that may or may not be a bad thing from chapter 1 to chapter 1178. You know what I mean? Things like that. I think it'll be pretty fun because I think it'll be pretty fun, like, content wise, because usually I'm trying to like build up recording. I think recording is like the worst part of my videos. I always mess up when it comes to recording. Recording my videos is always like tough. So I just want to get better recording wise, just talking to a microphone and getting this better, you know. Yeah, so if you guys like that idea, let me know. And trust me, it could literally be about anything, bro. Like, I mean, let's get some basics, right? It could be about women, it could be about sports, it could be, I don't know too much about sports, but it could be about sports, it could be about anime, it could be about video games, it could be about politics. I don't know the most about politics, but I'm generally aware. It could even be about like nonsense. It could even be about nonsense, like gay son or thought daughter, my perspective, you know what I mean? It could be stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, just, you can let me know. I'm probably gonna do it regardless, and yeah. So if you're interested in that, you can just, you know, make it happen. I do try to answer like questions and different things from people on Twitter, but you guys gotta know, whenever I'm on the internet that isn't YouTube, whenever I'm on Twitter or like TikTok, I'm on there for like bullshit, bro. I'm on there for bullshit. I'm there just to troll around. I'm there just to have fun. I'm there just to laugh, do whatever, and then move on. I think I'm only taking anything serious when it's on Discord. Not that I take Discord too seriously. I just, like, if it's on Discord, that means, okay, it's more personal, so I'm actually gonna answer stuff like that. So yeah, what if I do that? Not gonna lie, if I become big enough to where I can make like a Discord, if I got 10,000 subscribers, I'll get like a Discord. That sounds pretty fun. But not gonna lie, you guys will talk about nonsense. You guys will talk about nonsense, but it'll just be like 5 people hating on Attack on Titan every day. Yeah, that's the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Yeah, more positive videos to come. Like I said, I don't like the fact that I made 2 critical diatribes in a row. So in about 2 weeks from now, I'm gonna just make 2 or 3 positive videos. I already have one in mind. I have one ready, and yeah, just make more positive videos, because making too many negative videos kind of brings like a negative crowd to the channel. You know what I mean? It's like, and I guess I might as well address the elephant, the Code Geass video. When I mentioned it so much in October, November, December, I honestly thought I can crank out like a 2-hour video, 2.5-hour video about Code Geass, and it could be done in February. No. When I actually finished the rewatch of Code Geass, right? Because I rewatched it just to have like all my notes in order, everything. I rewatched it in November, December. When I rewatched it, I realized Code Geass is such a fucking train wreck. When I first watched it, I had the idea. I'm gonna play a clip right here at the end of the video from the Code Geass video. It's gonna be chopped up, so I'm not gonna export it and then put it in this timeline. I'm just gonna screen record it from the timeline, so it's gonna be a little chopped up. But I'm gonna play a clip. This anime has to be one of the worst pieces of fiction when it comes to tone specifically. It's especially odd because when done right, Code Geass' tone is actually incredibly engaging and very good. However, that's incredibly far and incredibly few between that we rarely see. Lelouch spouts some nonsense about how the nobles are overprivileged parasites and yada yada. We get introduced to Clovis via broadcast, and then he goes on this long melodramatic diatribe about how terrorism cannot be sustained and it aches his weeping heart and etc. Alright, after that clip, I realized after I watched it first in 2023. I didn't watch it first. I rewatched it in 2023. Realized it was dick. And then but I had like a limited perspective on writing and everything like that. So when I rewatched it now, I realized, oh, this is horrible. So my limited perspective on writing and how things should be written, and my like perspective on literature and stuff like that, made me think that the Code Geass video is gonna be 2.5 hours. No. Because I've gotten better at understanding and analyzing stuff like that, it's gonna be double its length. Like, I promise you, the Code Geass video, it might fuck around and be 5 hours long. A 5 hour long Code Geass video? You gotta be kidding me, bro. You gotta be kidding me, bro. Obviously, I want to condense the video and expedite it as fast as possible, but I also want to make sure everybody understands how Code Geass is not the story we think it is. I promise it will get made. This year, I will be making the Code Geass video, no matter what. No matter what. This video will have the Code Geass video, or this year will have the Code Geass video. Considering it is now April, like I guess it'll be April by the time I'm uploading this video. 8 months? Oh man, yeah, okay. Code Geass video could definitely come out. It could definitely come out. Okay, all right, let's go. Yeah, that's also a thing. If you want to ask me anything how I feel about Code Geass or why I'm making the Code Geass video, yeah, we could do that on the whole Patreon, John. I guess. I don't even know if I should make the Patreon, to be honest, bro. What if it's too like low level, like a cash grab? Now, how am I grabbing cash if it's $1? I don't know. Maybe memberships. All right. Anyway. That's it. Thank you guys for watching all of that, and I'll see you in like 2 weeks. Yeah.